Chapter 23:37. This time, even the womenfolk who had been listening to them with their heads tilted couldn't help but hold their bellies and laugh. Xie Dan Feng kept stomping her feet. She muttered and cursed Tan Tan for being a disappointment. It could be imagined that Tan Tan would suffer again after this meal. Ever since I've seen the fighting style of the heavenly devils, I've realized that those heavenly devils are very similar to the ones recorded in the ancient books of our divine race. Tan Tan frowned in distress. Moreover, I'm also a devil king. Could it be that I'm actually related to the heavenly demons? Tan Tan had been tangled up with this problem for the past few days. He didn't eat or drink. How can I be so evil? Tan Tan couldn't sleep for a few days because of this problem. Ha ha. Tan Tan's worries had already been guessed by everyone. They knew that this guy was tangled up with this problem. You're a heavenly demon? Aren't you being too whimsical? GMO raised his eyes and said disdainfully, heavenly demons have wings. Do you? Heavenly demons have 3 eyes on their foreheads. Do you? Tan Tan opened his eyes wide. I don't. You don't have anything. So, why do you call yourself a heavenly demon? Don't make me laugh to death. Everyone despised him. So, I'm not a heavenly demon. Tan Tan said full of hope. Get out of here. You're at most a demon. You're definitely not a heavenly demon. Emotionji burst into laughter, just like there are humans, elves, and demons in this world. Demons should also have many races. They're very different from each other. Humans have good people and bad people. They have all kinds of races. They're very different. You don't have to say any more. I understand. I completely understand. Tan Tan slapped the table and stood up. He pointed at Emotionji and cursed, Motherfucker Emotionji, why didn't you say so earlier? You made me worry for so long. It's all your fault. Emotionji was stunned when he heard this. He didn't react for a while. Then, anger rose in his heart. He became angry. I'm wrong for enlightening you. Old 4, old 5, old 7, old 8. Help third brother beat this guy up. Emotionji's domineering side as the third brother finally revealed itself. He gazed at Dong Wuxiang, Xie Dan Qiong, and the rest of the younger brothers with a threatening look in his eyes. Everyone who was originally unconvinced and disobedient suddenly trembled in fear. So, they all fought bravely to be the first to show off. Beat him up. This bastard actually dared to scold my third brother. How dare he? That's right. Give him a good beating. Beat him up until his head is swollen. Let's see if he still dares to not learn his lesson. That's right. Otherwise, how could I have such a deep impression of him? I have to let him know who he can offend and who he can't. So, a certain great demon king Tan Tan finally transformed into a great demon king pig after he had been violently beaten up by a group of people. He stood up with a bloody nose and a swollen face. However, he was in a good mood and was laughing heartily. If someone who didn't know what was going on was here, they would be sure of one thing. This ugly guy was a masochist. So many people had joined forces to beat him up, and he was laughing heartily in satisfaction. How could an ordinary person do that? Fourth brother Dong Wuxiang smiled in a simple and honest manner. He patted Tan Tan's shoulder vigorously. Brother, you can rest assured. Even if you're a heavenly demon, you're still my brother. Tan Tan was startled as he heard these words. But his heart was shaken again. Dong Wuxiang had always been a man of few words. But these words carried a lot of weight. Tan Tan's eyes became wet. He fiercely punched back at Dong Wuxiang. Then he loudly scolded, Go to hell. You're the heavenly demon. I'm a great demon king. I'm fundamentally different from those heavenly demons. Remember this clearly. However, Emotionji and the others could clearly hear the slight tremor in Tan Tan's laughter. Chu Yang smiled and softly said, I say, junior brother Tan Tan. You have too many knots in your heart, especially when you're in front of your brothers. Chu Yang looked at Tan Tan and said meaningfully. He didn't say anything more after he had spoken halfway. He knew that Tan Tan would understand. In fact, he would understand. Tan Tan immediately fell into silence after Chu Yang's words. However, Everyone could clearly feel that the aura on his body was gradually changing. The brothers quietly drank wine. Their hearts were filled with joy. That was because Tan Tan's aura had returned to normal. Moreover, it was becoming more and more pure and powerful. All these signs indicated that he had thoroughly walked out of his heart's devil. He had gotten rid of it and had overcome it. The heart's devil could no longer restrain Tan Tan. A very long time passed. Suddenly, a burst of explosive sounds echoed in the air. Everyone turned their heads to look. They saw that Tan Tan's long hair was fluttering in the wind. His entire body was curled up in black energy, and an extremely dark luster had suddenly emerged. Even his eyes had turned into the purest black. Then, the black and glossy energy gradually took the shape of a huge cocoon-like thing, and wrapped Tan Tan's entire body inside it. In fact, it was airtight. Chu Yang felt a burst of joy in his heart. After Tan Tan had gotten rid of his heart's devil, his cultivation had made another breakthrough. He had advanced by leaps and bounds again. In fact, Tan Tan had encountered extraordinary opportunities along the way. That day, he and Chu Yang were in the dark place of Yama Gorge. He had inherited the supreme true spirit. His fate had already exceeded the scope of predestination. It was even higher than tribulation. He was also the only person who had the hope of standing side by side with Chu Yang in the future. However, recently, his cultivation progress had stagnated because of the heart's devil. Instead, he had fallen behind tribulation. He told Xie Danfeng to carry Tan Tan back to the tent. He solemnly instructed that no one was to disturb them. Then he sat down again. What should we do next? The one who asked this question was Xie Danqiong. He had won the battle with Yuan Tianjia. However, as the owner of this place, Xie Danqiong, who was about to ascend to the peak of power in Mo Yuntian, felt a little empty, frightened, and uncomfortable. An inexplicable emotion similar to, "I don't know what I should do next," arose spontaneously. What should we do? Let nature take its course. Mo Tianji chuckled. Let nature take its course? How can I let nature take its course? Do you want me to sit on the throne of Heaven Emperor Mo Yun? Xie Danqiong seemed to be even more at a loss. He blurted out. Just let nature take its course. You must sit on the throne of Heaven Emperor Mo Yun. You must sit on it firmly all the way. Mo Tianji's smiling eyes turned cold. Even his voice became awe-inspiring at this moment. You don't need to care about what others do. You only need to ascend to the throne of Heaven Emperor. Then, use the destiny of this world to nourish yourself. Do your best to improve your cultivation. Also, find and cultivate a group of experts. At the critical moment, you can pull them out to prepare for the future. Heaven Emperor Mo Yun. Xie Danqiong smiled bitterly. It was easier said than done to be the Heaven Emperor. Just now, he blurted it out in a moment of impulse. His cultivation, reputation, status seemed to be insufficient, right? Don't think too much about this and that. The main reason why Yuan Tianjia was eliminated by us was that he was a heavenly demon. He was not a native of the Heaven Imperial Court. Even though he had a certain amount of destiny, he could not fully utilize it. Therefore, I dare to conclude that Yuan Tianjia's combat power is not inferior to Di Ho. However, in some aspects, he is definitely far from enough. But you are different. You can do it because you are a human. Even if you are not a native, just being a human is enough, Mo Tianji said in a deep voice. Have you ever thought about my cultivation, reputation, status, and merits? Xie Danqiong shook his head helplessly. Although it was equivalent to a successful rebellion now, everyone knew that this time, it was not a real rebellion in the true sense. The main purpose of this incident was to kill the heavenly demon, not to rebel. This was where the righteousness lay and could not be changed. Therefore, it was completely impossible for Xie Danqiong to directly ascend to the position of Heaven Emperor in the name of rebellion. Xie Danqiong was not stupid. He had at least self-awareness. He knew that he could not do it now. He was not qualified. All of this is not a problem, Mo Tianji said coldly. Long before I came, I had already instructed the intelligence department to make preparations. As long as the news of Yuan Tianjia's death was confirmed, There would be extravagant follow-up actions. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Even Chu Yang, who had always understood Mo Tianji's way of doing things, was no exception. Wasn't this way of doing things a little too much? The first moment after Yuan Tianjia was killed, I had already issued the order. Mo Tianji's eyes were cold. The general content was that you established the Heavenly Armament Pavilion because you discovered Yuan Tianjia's identity. However, at that time, your words carried little weight. You could only desperately gather forces in case of emergencies. Facts have proven that your concerns were correct. The cause of the rebellion of the Seven Kings was also because of your many efforts to reveal Yuan Tianjia's true identity to the Seven Kings. Therefore, the Seven Kings angrily fought with Yuan Tianjia. Regarding this point, you can rest assured. The calligraphy and painting kings will testify for you. As for Meng Wuya's side, it was also because of you, Xie Dan Qiong, that he took the opportunity to leave Mo Yuntian. He accumulated his strength and prepared to make a comeback, so that he could work together day and night to destroy the devil. And now, didn't he really come back? Therefore, this is also a genuine witness and material evidence. As for Mu Zonglan, it was also because of you, Xie Dan Qiong, that he was able to recognize Yuan Tianjia's true identity in time and set things right. And us, who played a key role in the battle against the demons, were all because you were worried about the chaos of the heavenly demons. Therefore, you specially invited us to come and help you kill the demons. And in the end, Yuan Tianji was killed by your scheme. In your battle against the heavenly demon, everyone was injured. Only you managed to severely injure the heavenly demon's body, which was the key to victory. In the end, you even managed to escape unscathed. Such strength is extraordinary. Now that I've said it, you should understand, right? Sorry for taking such a long leave. These 3 days of kowtowing were really tiring. Ha! Chapter 23:38. Mo Tianji had a faint smile on his face as everyone was dumbstruck and flabbergasted. I will guide the public opinion. All right, the Heavenly Secret Intelligence Department that played a huge role in this battle was also founded by you, Xie Dan Qiong. There is only one reason for it, and that is to kill the demons. And the initiator of all of this is you, Xie Dan Qiong. The foundation, achievements, and contributions of our brothers are all yours. Don't have any psychological burden. In summary, it can be said that you, Xie Dan Qiong, saved the entire ink cloud sky and countless people in the heavenly imperial court with your strength alone. Mo Tianji smiled faintly. In this way, if you are not the heavenly emperor, who will be? Who can compare to your extraordinary achievements? Without Xie Dan Qiong, there would be no ink cloud sky. Without Xie Dan Qiong, ink cloud sky might have become another purple cloud sky. If Xie Dan Qiong, who has great foresight, outstanding cultivation, and great talent, doesn't become the next heavenly emperor of ink cloud sky, who else can bear it? So, you, Xie Dan Qiong, are undeniably responsible. Mo Tianji's last sentence made everyone completely dumbfounded. What in the world was this? Why did Mo Tianji's explanation sound so logical and logical? How did it fit perfectly? In the process of the brothers' eyes getting bigger and bigger, Mo Tianji actually arranged a huge achievement for Xie Dan Qiong that was enough to shock the past and present, enough to leave his name in the annals of history, enough to cover the sky and cover the earth. Even Chu Yang was shocked from the bottom of his heart at this moment. Fuck, how can this be? What the fuck? Isn't this too much? Xie Dan Qiong stared and said stutteringly, although it seems that the truth can be said that the brothers and I are on the same level, and the contribution can be considered as mine, but this seems to be not enough, not open enough, not enough. A little guilty, Mhanji stared and said, what is open and above board? The winner is the king, and the winner is open and above board. What is guilty? Don't tell me that you still need us brothers to do something for you. The truth is that you saved billions of Mo Yuntian citizens. Don't tell me you still feel guilty towards them. All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Xie Dan Qiong, this is related to the success or failure of the entire heavenly imperial court in fighting against the heavenly demon. Why do you still shrink back? Xie Dan Qiong heaved a sigh. His facial expression became particularly dignified. Our brothers have already helped you as much as we can. The rest is your responsibility, and you have to shoulder it. Tianji's words were right, you have to shoulder it. Chu Yang said softly, but right now, there's still one more problem, and it seems to be the biggest problem. That is the recognition of the Saint Monarch. This is not a problem at all. Mo Tianji sneered, the entire Heaven Imperial Court should know one thing by now. This Saint Monarch was deceived by the Heavenly Devil. He had once faced the entire Moyun Heaven and testified that Yuan Tianjie wasn't a heavenly devil. He even denounced the great hero Mu Zonglan as a traitor. However, the truth was that Xie Danqiong had uncovered the true face of the heavenly devil and removed a great hidden worry for the Heavenly Imperial Court. I've already ordered for this news to be spread throughout the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Mo Tianji's face was cold. If the Saint Monarch rejects Xie Danqiong's application to be the Heavenly Emperor of Moyun Heaven, then I'm completely confident that within a few days, the entire Heaven Imperial Court will be filled with doubts about the Saint Monarch. The Saint Monarch is the #1 person in the Heaven Imperial Court. His cultivation is unfathomable. Why was he deceived by the Heavenly Devil for so long? He was even willing to testify for the Heavenly Devil? What is the reason for this? What is the reason? He testified that Yuan Tianjie wasn't a heavenly devil in front of everyone, but the truth was a resounding slap to his face. Then, is the Saint Monarch's heart so natural? He was wrong, but he still didn't let the demon slayer hero be the heavenly emperor. What is the meaning of this? Is he angry out of humiliation? By extension, was the Saint Monarch also deceived in the purple cloud heavens back then? How do we calculate? How many years has the Saint Monarch been deceived? How many times? The final conclusion, is the Saint Monarch also a heavenly devil? Otherwise, why would he be like this? Mo Tianji smiled sinisterly. He was calm as he threw out a series of trump cards that he had prepared. Everyone who heard it felt their hair stand on end. They were dumbfounded and broke out in cold sweat. Even Chu Yang wiped away his cold sweat. Mo Tianji was really too scary. He could see through people's hearts, manipulate people's hearts, control people's hearts, and do as he pleased. Although he could think of these methods, he would never be able to prepare all the backup plans in advance like Mo Tianji. At best, he could only react to each move as it came. However, Mo Tianji had already thought of a countermeasure from the very beginning. This was what was truly frightening about it. In view of this, the Saint Monarch is also a smart person. I believe that he won't disagree. Even if it's him, he also doesn't want to face the doubts of everyone in the world. Mo Tianji said lightly, I guess. Not only will the Saint Monarch not stop it, he will also praise and reward Xie Danqiong greatly. Then, he will logically let Xie Danqiong become the heavenly emperor of Ink Cloud. But, it's hard to say how he will deal with you in the future and how he will restrict you. I haven't thought that far yet, because that Lord Saint Monarch will definitely still feel uncomfortable in his heart. In this matter, it's equivalent to him being coerced and forced into helplessness. Mo Tianji smiled, I'm afraid that since the Saint Monarch ruled the Heavenly Imperial Court for millions of years, this is the first time, right? Gu Duxing smiled bitterly, I always felt that the Saint Monarch wasn't very enthusiastic about the heavenly demons. But if he continues to be so, with you, Tianji, in the future, I'm afraid that his helplessness will only increase. Everyone laughed. But Chu Yang and Mo Tianji didn't laugh. After a long time, the two looked at each other and sighed softly. The two of them definitely didn't want such a situation to happen again in their hearts. With Mo Yuntian this time, it was enough. It was already too much. If such an unforeseen event happened in other worlds, then there would be no chance of winning the war against the heavenly demons in the future. As the #1 person in the Heavenly Imperial Court, if the Saint Monarch really, the two of them forced themselves to stop thinking about it. They didn't want to think about the accident, that obviously didn't have a big chance but could really happen. The army stretched for hundreds of miles and advanced towards the imperial capital. Along the way, countless people lined the streets to welcome them. Banners fluttered in the wind and voices of gratitude filled the ears. Many people were in tears and deeply apologized to Mu Tsonglan. Previously, they had misunderstood Mu Tsonglan. Now that they knew the truth of the matter, they were extremely ashamed of their actions in the past and blamed themselves to the extreme. As for when Xie Danqiong appeared, each and every one of them kowtowed as if they had seen a living deity. Their gratitude was indescribable. Under Mo Tianji's unbridled and deliberate publicity, and with the cooperation of Mu Tsonglan and the others, the name Xie Danqiong had become the representative of Mo Yuntian's savior. As long as one heard Xie Danqiong's name, they would involuntarily feel reverence for him. Think about it, Xie Danqiong was far-sighted and discerning. When no one noticed anything strange, he recognized Yuan Tianjie's true colors. Then, under the enormous pressure of the entire world, he didn't hesitate to sully himself and become an outlaw to establish the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. Then, with the initial few hundred people, he began to call for help and began to prepare for the slaughter of the heavenly demons. Along the way, endless bitterness was a small matter. Every day, he had to go through several battles of blood and fire. He struggled to survive in the face of death. Fortunately, the heavens protected him and he persevered all the way. Until the end, when he personally slaughtered the heavenly demons, Xie Danqiong's experience could really be said to be praiseworthy and his name would be passed down through the ages. In particular, there were many heart-wrenching rumors about the past. Xie Danqiong often fell to his feet and sighed for Mo Yuntian's suffering. He didn't sleep and cried bitterly. Moreover, he once said, "The pitiful people of Mo Yuntian were poisoned by the heavenly demons. I, Xie Danqiong, am ashamed to face the heavens and earth." Such touching words. Cough cough. When Xie Danqiong himself heard these words, he couldn't help but have goosebumps all over his body. For a moment, his hair stood on end. Did I say this? Did I really say this? But no matter what, the current Xie Danqiong was not only a hero in Mo Yuntian, but also the savior of this world. Not only that, he was a legend of a generation, a myth. A far-sighted and benevolent person with lofty ideals who cared about the world. A man with an open mind, bright conduct, far-sighted, and worked his heart out for the people of Mo Yuntian. He was willing to die 10,000 deaths. A saint lord of a generation. Almost every family spontaneously and consciously worshipped Xie Danqiong's longevity tablet. If you don't support such a hero, who else do you want to support? What? You actually oppose Xie Danqiong? Motherfucker, haven't you been fooled enough by the heavenly demons? Come, I'll compete with you and teach you an ungrateful person a lesson. In a very short period of time, the people of Mo Yuntian were united in their hearts. So much so that along the way, Xie Danqiong's army walked through a sea of people, mountains of flowers, lakes of wine and forests of meat. They cheered and supported along the way. So much so that the army walked very slowly. Under Mo Tianji's deliberate arrangement, Xie Danqiong would appear every once in a while, riding a tall horse. With a warm smile, he would greet the people of Mo Yuntian enthusiastically. Thank you everyone. You all have worked hard too. It's not easy for you all. In the future, after suffering, happiness will come. Everyone will live a peaceful and happy life. Thank you everyone. I, Xie Danqiong, am sincerely grateful. Everyone go back. I owe this uncle. Slow down. You're old, take care of your body. Oh, this big sister, don't push forward with your child. Everyone make way, make way. This lady, I already have a wife. You want to be a concubine? That's not suitable. Really not suitable. Cough, cough, cough. Cough, cough. This big brother, I'm not interested in men. Really not interested. Xie Danqiong plunged into the bed, covered his face and groaned, Mo Tianji, you bastard, you want to kill me. Thank you everyone. Thank you for your understanding. In these few days, no one questioned or cursed me. I'm very satisfied. Chapter 2339. Everyone burst into laughter upon seeing this. Under Mo Tianji's deliberate manipulation, design and coercion, Xie Danqiong had to appear personally. In just a few days, Xie Danqiong was already suffering unspeakably. That handsome face was almost stiff from smiling, but he still had to appear and laugh. It was simply selling his smile. No, it was even more miserable than selling his smile. The road of tragedy was indescribable. He was truly physically and mentally exhausted. He felt even more tired than the battle with Yuan Tianjie previously. But along the way, Xie Danqiong's image of being close to the people was undoubtedly deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Especially Xie Danqiong's handsome appearance, refined manner of speech, proper manners, natural and unrestrained, but with an unattainable majesty. This is the real heir of a king. Someone sighed. This is the real ruler descending to the world. Someone sighed. Xie Danqiong is too handsome. If I can be his concubine, I will be satisfied. A large number of love-struck women raised their arms and shouted. Xie Danqiong is too handsome. I love him too. If I can spend a night with him, I will have no regrets in this life. A few wretched men said. Not knowing when, the crowd began to have similar voices. What do you think? Let Xie Danqiong be our heavenly emperor of Moyun Sky. If someone opposes our hero, what should we do? Those who dare to oppose are those with ulterior motives. Is there any need to say what we should do? Kill him. Kill him. Firmly support Xie Danqiong. Someone began to shout slogans. Firmly support Xie Danqiong. Everyone echoed. Long live Emperor Qianghua. Long live Emperor Qianghua. The voices grew louder and louder. Xie Danqiong had to come forward many times to thank and decline. How can I be the heavenly emperor of heaven? This can't be done. My original intention was only to eradicate the heavenly demon, so that the people of Moyun Sky would no longer be deceived by it and live a good life without any hidden dangers. I actually didn't do anything, just some small things. When he said this sentence that Mo Tianji taught him, Xie Danqiong felt that he was as hypocritical as a pile of shit. If these were small things, then what big things? However, the cheers of the crowd grew even louder, and their support grew even stronger. There were even people who burst into tears. If Xie Danqiong doesn't become the celestial emperor, I'll go and die. Ooh, what a good person. Only such a selfless person who serves the people deserves to be the heavenly monarch of the dark cloud heaven. The Yuan Tianjie of the past was a pile of shit. We firmly support Xie Danqiong. Xie Danqiong is the celestial emperor. Ao ao ao. Unknowingly, such cries had already engulfed the entire ink cloud sky. Countless people began to move towards the imperial capital. They were like the waves of the sea, coming endlessly. They were unstoppable. It wasn't a very long journey, but it took them a full 3 months to return to the imperial capital. In these 3 months, the cultivation of each of the brothers had increased by a large margin. Every day, they cultivated diligently. With the 2 cold-faced supervisors, Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang, as well as the support of Chu Yang's heavenly treasures, everyone cultivated as if their lives depended on it. Almost all of them had reached the critical point of breaking through. Only Xie Danqiong's cultivation didn't improve at all. He was still in the same place and even regressed a little. But Xie Danqiong's aura was also changing and transforming day by day. Under the strong support of more than 80% of the people in Ink Cloud Sky, Xie Danqiong, who was imperceptibly influenced, gradually gained the demeanor of a king. No matter whether Xie Danqiong was willing or not, as long as he reached this position and this height, that strange aura of a superior naturally appeared on Xie Danqiong's body. There was no way to refuse. The Japanese-style imperial capital was already packed with people. Even the vast imperial palace had already been built when Xie Danqiong was on the road. All the experts in the imperial capital worked together, and a small part of it was already built. Heart Imperial Palace was on the original site of Yuan Tianjie's Imperial Palace. Jasper Flower Imperial Palace. Everyone in Ink Cloud Sky, regardless of whether it was the officials or the people, all of them gathered to write a petition, requesting that Xie Danqiong be the new celestial emperor of Ink Cloud Sky. The petition letter was sent to the Extreme Heaven Saint at lightning speed. On that day, the Extreme Heaven was covered with dark clouds. Boundless haze covered the entire clear sky. The The sound of thunder was faint, as if a rainstorm was coming. It was as if a kind of speechless anger of the heavens had shrouded the entire heavenly imperial court. Everyone was trembling with fear. They didn't understand what was going on at all. Only a few people who knew the inside story knew that His Majesty the Saint couldn't accept Xie Danqiong's action of acting first and reporting later. His Majesty the Saint couldn't accept it, but he still had to accept it. His Majesty the Saint definitely didn't feel good. He was probably already furious. Something big was going to happen in the entire heavenly imperial court. However, what went beyond the expectations of these discerning people was that His Majesty the Saint didn't make any objection to this petition. At the very least, on the surface, he seemed to be very happy. He very happily approved Xie Danqiong's application to take over as Celestial Emperor of Incloud Sky. He even said that on the day of Great Emperor Qionghua's ascension ceremony, he would personally preside over and congratulate her. In addition, he also very generously admitted his previous negligence. "I'm sincerely ashamed. In these long millions of years, I actually didn't completely see through Yuan Tianjie's true identity and origin. I was deceived by his tricks. Thanks to Great Emperor Qionghua's painstaking efforts, upholding her original intentions, she saw through the true face of the heavenly demon. She even unified all the forces and worked together to eliminate the heavenly demon. It's really commendable. This matter has also sounded the alarm for me. These millions of years of peace really made me slack off." Apart from a few sentences of criticism and sighing with emotion, the rest of the article was full of heartfelt praise for Xie Danqiong. Incloud Sky's cheers were thunderous. It was also because of His Majesty the Saint's words that Xie Danqiong's title of Great Emperor Qionghu spread like wildfire. In a few days, it had already resounded throughout the world. Great Emperor Qionghu. Under the unanimous strong request of his subordinates, Xie Danqiong could only reluctantly go with the flow and let nature take its course. Naturally, Incloud Sky's imperial palace was officially renamed as Great Emperor Palace. His imperial title was also naturally named as Great Emperor Qionghu. The official meeting place was named as Great Emperor Qionghu Palace. And Incloud Sky's imperial capital was officially named as Great Emperor Qionghu City. In a moment, the entire Incloud Sky was filled with Great Emperor Qionghu. It was really Great Emperor Qionghu, Great Emperor Qionghu. It was worthy of its name. There was a rumor in the martial world. When Great Emperor Qionghu makes a move, Great Emperor Qionghu fills the imperial capital with Great Emperor Qionghu. This was used to describe Xie Danqiong's superb cultivation. Gradually, Xie Danqiong's cultivation had already become the #1 person in Incloud Sky. Great Emperor Qionghu, Great Emperor Qionghu, Great Emperor Qionghu, Great Emperor Qionghu. Great Emperor Qionghu fully deserved to be called the #1 expert of Incloud Sky, Great Emperor Qionghu. The moment Mo Tianji found out about this result, he fiercely smashed his cup on the ground. His viburnum flowers will never be defeated and will never decline. This was one of the few times Mo Tianji lost his composure. "What #1 expert? Saint, do you think I don't know what you want to do? Do you think I, Mo Tianji, really have any scruples about you? If you anger me, don't even think about being the saint for long," Mo Tianji said fiercely. When he said this, only Chu Yang was beside him. And only Chu Yang truly understood Mo Tianji. He truly knew how furious Mo Tianji was at this moment. But no matter how furious Mo Tianji was, in a moment, the entire Incloud Sky became a sea of joy. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when the saint finally approved Xie Danqiong to take over as the heavenly emperor. Then they were extremely grateful to the saint. His Majesty the Saint is indeed a great person. Thus, everyone was preparing for the Great Emperor Qionghua's ascension ceremony. When the time came, the whole world would celebrate and be filled with joy. Regardless of whether it was in the city, the countryside, or the mountains, as long as there were people there, they would treat the ascension of Great Emperor Qionghu as the #1 joyous event. A surge of power of destiny and power of faith that was hard to see with the naked eye quietly formed and grew stronger. Under Mu Tsonglan's suggestion, Xie Danqiong formed a new 7 Stars Guard. Under Chu Yang's persuasion, Crazy Book and Painting King became the new leaders of Xie Danqiong's 7 Stars Guard with extremely complicated feelings. It was still the same position, and the same place to guard, but they would never see their good brothers who had cultivated together for millions of years. Originally, they thought that if they were lucky enough to perish together with Yuan Tianji, they would be able to reunite with their brothers who had left the world. However, the result was that Chu Yang and Tribulation worked together to kill Yuan Tianji. Although the two of them also contributed a lot in the process of killing the demon, it was Chu Yang and Tribulation who made the fatal blow in the end. A real man was happy to repay kindness and revenge. Now that the enmity was settled, the kindness had not been repaid. This kindness did not only belong to the two of them but also to all of their brothers. How could they not repay it? In view of this, Calligraphy and Painting King had to let go of their thoughts and become the 7 Stars Guard again to guard this world. When they sat at the core of the Great Destiny Formation again, where Big Brother and Second Brother originally sat, the two of them were inexplicably emotional, and tears streamed down their faces. Big Brother, Second Brother, brothers, can you feel it? We miss you so much. We really miss you so much. The other 5 guards were carefully selected from the high-level peak saints. In just half a day, they were all settled. In selecting the 7 Stars Guard, strength was not the most important thing. The most important thing was sincerity and loyalty. But now that everyone was united, there were very few people who deceived them. Seeing that a new destiny nebula was formed in the sky above Mo Yuntian, Mo Tianji frowned tightly. What's wrong? Is there something wrong? Chu Yang asked softly. Sorry, I went out with my wife in the afternoon to do something, so the update is a bit late. Also, today is little sister Ling Piaoping's birthday. Let us wish her a happy birthday. Another secret, little sister Piaoping is a great beauty who is loved by everyone. And, she just graduated from university and doesn't have a boyfriend. Chapter 2340. Well, I do feel that something is wrong. The current situation is good, and the luck can gather quickly. This is a logical thing, and it's also within my expectations. But the gathering of the luck nebula is too much. Xie Danqiong alone can't use such a large amount of luck power. At least 80% of it has mysteriously disappeared after gathering. The situation of this big formation is not normal, very abnormal. I need to go and take a look and study it carefully. I'm afraid that even Yuan Tianjie doesn't know about this. Mo Tianji cautiously told Chu Yang about his observations. Chu Yang couldn't help but be shocked. There was a change. After Mo Tianji's careful study, he slightly changed the 7 Stars luck formation. Then he walked out with Chu Yang with a serious face. After Mo Tianji changed part of the operation of the formation, Shu Kuang and Painting King, who had lived here for a long time, clearly felt that their feelings were completely different. Originally, he and his brothers had used their own cultivation to ensure the normal operation of the formation, and the situation just now was the same. In other words, the 7 Stars Protector was one of the driving forces that ensured the permanent operation of the Great Providence Formation, and the Great Providence Formation would not be of any help to him. This was because it had always been like this. Old 7 Stars Protectors like Shu Hua did not find it strange, and new 7 Stars Protectors also thought that this was their responsibility. Since they had enjoyed the honor of being a 7 Stars Protector, how could they not do their best to maintain it? But now, Shu Kuang and Painting King clearly felt the difference. When they used their cultivation to ensure the normal operation of the Great Nebula Formation, the Great Nebula Formation was also providing them with reverse energy. Moreover, it was more than what they used, and it was pure. Originally, the protective formation was just a simple job, and it was completely free work. But now, the protective formation had a rich reward, or it could be said that it was an excellent cultivation environment. Regarding this change, the two were inexplicably shocked, but also inexplicably excited. Something's very wrong. After Mo Tianji walked out, he said in a low voice, if the other Heavenly Emperor's Providence formations are also like this, Then, at least 80% of the power of providence derived from the people's faith would have been inexplicably wasted or disappeared to some unknown place. Chu Yang was speechless. 80% of 1,000,000 years of providence? What kind of power was that? Moreover, the wording of that imperial edict of the Saint Monarch was too beautiful. Mo Tianji tightly knitted his brows. It basically blocked all of our moves. If Xie Danqiong were to become the heavenly emperor, the situation would change with the passage of time, and all of our current arrangements would be completely useless at that time. The Saint Monarch's move was very wonderful. Mo Tianji had already immersed himself in thinking about this matter for several days. Right now, the crux of the matter is the Great Nebula Array. I need to take a look at the other Heavenly Emperor's Great Nebula Arrays, as well as the Saint's Great Nebula Arrays, before I can make a final conclusion. However, the biggest problem now is Xie Danqiong's ascension ceremony. Mo Tianji furrowed his brows. There was a fierce look in his eyes. It was as if he had seen an old hen pouncing on its chicks. He said word by word, "I have a premonition that this coronation ceremony won't be very peaceful." "Yes, I also have a similar premonition about this." Chu Yang said seriously, "The Saint Monarch's attitude is too good. It makes people uneasy." Mo Tianji silently nodded in agreement, "And this time, it won't be peaceful. The Saint Monarch will personally take action. It will definitely not be a small matter. Think about it from another perspective. If you wanted to destroy Xie Danqiong's coronation ceremony this time, and prevent Xie Danqiong from truly becoming the heavenly emperor of Ink Cloud, what would you do?" Chu Yang frowned and asked. "It's difficult to think about it from another perspective. If it were me, there would be at least thousands of ways to make this coronation ceremony a joke. It would be difficult to arrange a targeted strategy. This is where the real difficulty lies." Mo Tianji's face was even more worried. "That's true. But we still need to have a corresponding countermeasure. So we can't prepare all the countermeasure plans. But we can first filter out the most effective ones from your thousands of methods. Then, we can prepare the corresponding countermeasure." Chu Yang solemnly said, "We should do our best to prepare for a rainy day in case of emergency." Mo Tianji nodded slowly. "Dan Qiong is the first among us brothers to ascend to the position of the Heavenly Emperor. It is also the beginning of us brothers to truly gain a foothold in the Heavenly Imperial Court. We must ensure that his coronation ceremony is foolproof." Chu Yang said word by word. He seemed to feel that his calamity sword was already impatient to let out a cry. It was a kind of exhilarating atmosphere to welcome the upcoming battle. If there are still problems in our brother's coronation ceremony, then I, Mo Tianji, don't need to show my face anymore. I can't afford to lose this face. Mo Tianji sneered, "Let's go. Let's discuss this properly. Tell Gu Duxing and the others to get ready. During this period of time, they must continue to strengthen their own cultivation." 3 months later, during the coronation ceremony, I, Mo Tianji, will use the strength of Brother Jie to catch all the people who dare to come and make trouble, once and for all. Mo Tianji's voice was cold and ruthless. Chu Yang's solemn face suddenly relaxed. He even laughed softly. "At that time, the Saint Lord will definitely be present. If we completely kill those people in front of the Saint Lord, the Saint Lord's expression will definitely be very pleasant to look at, right? It will definitely be very pleasant to look at. Even if his expression doesn't look good, it won't do." Mo Tianji sneered. Chu Yang knew that this time, Mo Tianji was really serious. He really had the intention to kill. The Saint Lord's imperial edict was full of praise, which made Mo Tianji feel the strong murderous intent that shrouded Xie Danqiong. But because of this, it also thoroughly angered this master of calculation and manipulation. Like Chu Yang, Mo Tianji's bottom line was his sister Mo Qingwu, his brothers Chu Yang and the others, and his own family. A dragon had a reverse scale. Once touched, it would be angry. Once angry, blood would flow for thousands of miles. This time, the Saint Lord had undoubtedly touched Mo Tianji's reverse scale. This terrifying character, under the terrifying pressure of the Saint Lord, used his brain to its fullest for the first time, and became hysterically furious. This master of calculation and manipulation, who had always been used to hiding behind the scenes and controlling the overall situation, was finally going to reveal his ferocious fangs in the Heaven Imperial Court today. Anyone who dared to invade would definitely be killed by Tianji's mental, physical, and intellectual strength. That would be the common nightmare of all invading enemies. Chu Yang absolutely believed in this point. He had never doubted it. The two of them left together and found a place to discuss in detail. Until the next morning, Minister Chu walked out with a pale face and a hint of lingering fear. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. Whenever he thought of the plan that Tianji had formulated, Chu Yang couldn't help but feel his hair stand on end. Too ruthless. Too vicious. Especially for those who participated in the discussion, what would happen to those who personally experienced it? Would they be looking forward to it? Or would they be looking forward to it? Chu Yang turned around and went straight to Jasper Flower Emperor Palace. But he didn't go to see Xie Dan Qiong. Instead, he entered quietly and found the original resting place of Yuan Tianjia. He emitted an unusually large amount of spiritual energy and carefully investigated it bit by bit. Throughout the entire process, Chu Yang was extremely cautious. He didn't alert anyone at all. This was because he wanted to verify something else. Although Yuan Tianjia was dead now and his imperial palace had been destroyed, Chu Yang believed that there was definitely something that hadn't been destroyed yet. Yuan Tianjia left in a hurry. Moreover, he didn't believe that he would fail. So those things should still exist. And what Chu Yang was looking for was exactly those things. Even though he didn't know what he was looking for, Chu Yang believed that once he found something, it would definitely be the thing he was looking for. Whether it was a piece of paper, a piece of news, or some remnants of evidence. Chu Yang used his movement technique and increased his speed to the extreme. Like a wisp of smoke, he flew past the imperial palace. Although the incomplete palace was still heavily guarded, it was not a palace that had already been completed and people had moved in. What's more, Chu Yang's current cultivation could be considered to be at the peak even in the whole world. Except for super experts like Jun Yiho and the Seven Stars Guards, he really didn't need to be afraid of anyone else. Rushing through the imperial palace at this moment was just a small demonstration of his skill. It was really like entering a no-man's land. The former site of Yuan Tianjia's imperial palace was now an ownerless object. There was no one to protect it at all. It was relatively easier for Chu Yang to investigate. Using his powerful spiritual power to search bit by bit, Chu Yang finally found an unusual place after more than an hour. Below the original location of Yuan Tianji's palace, at least 1,000 feet below the ground, there was a very strange place. Chu Yang couldn't help but frown at this discovery. Now that he was building a new palace above it, if he dug it up, it wouldn't be an auspicious thing. This was related to his brother's great cause. Even if Chu Yang didn't care much about this kind of thing, he still didn't want to commit this kind of taboo. After a moment of consideration, he summoned the divine spirit of the calamity and gave it instructions. The divine spirit of the calamity nodded repeatedly and left as instructed. Chu Yang waited quietly here. He couldn't help but think of the sword spirit. He actually missed the sword spirit a little. The help that the divine spirit of the calamity and the sword spirit gave him was similar. In terms of cultivation, the divine spirit of the calamity surpassed the sword spirit by too much. But when he was with the divine spirit of the calamity, he always had this kind of feeling that he was a subordinate. He would only carry out his orders. He would never or dare to joke with him. Chapter 2341. That was a very complicated but warm feeling. He could laugh and scold angrily. He could lecture with stern words. He could be impudent. The sword spirit had witnessed Chu Yang's growth. He had followed him from the lower three heavens. So, the two of them were almost like one. In fact, this, almost as if they were one, went beyond the meaning of this sentence. When facing an enemy, Chu Yang could completely rest assured and let the sword spirit take full control of his body without any ill feelings. But if it was the tribulation divine soul, Chu Yang couldn't trust him this much. Although a similar situation hadn't happened yet, If it did, Chu Yang would still hesitate and find it difficult to make a choice no matter how critical the situation was. After the last farewell, the sword spirit disappeared without a trace and there was no news of him. Chu Yang was actually very worried. But he understood the sword spirit and his feelings. All along, the sword spirit had been a teacher and a friend to Chu Yang, a guide. But with Chu Yang's amazing progress, the sword spirit who had been a great help was gradually left behind, and the gap was getting wider and wider. Whether it was Chu Yang himself or Chu Yang's subordinates, they all had higher cultivations than the sword spirit. This situation made the sword spirit feel very disappointed. He even felt that if he continued to follow Chu Yang, not only would he not be of help, but he would also become a burden. This was undoubtedly an unbearable thing for the sword spirit, so he chose to leave and find his own opportunities to break through. What the sword spirit wanted was to return in a powerful manner one day. Then he would fight alongside Chu Yang and rise again. Chu Yang understood this very well. So he didn't stop him from staying, although he was very reluctant. But he could only silently bless the sword spirit and silently look forward to his early return. The tribulation divine soul quietly sneaked into the ground and carefully searched for the special place Chu Yang mentioned. Yuan Tianjie definitely couldn't go in every day with mud all over his body. So, there must be a secret passage. And what the tribulation divine soul had to do now was to find this secret passage. This wasn't difficult at all for the tribulation divine soul. It was a piece of cake. It didn't take long before the tribulation spirit turned into a cloud of smoke and appeared in front of Chu Yang. Little ancestor, I've found the passage. However, the entrance was covered by the previous big explosion. I've already cleared it out. You only need to lift up the stone slab that is about 10 feet wide. Then, you'll be able to see the hidden entrance about 10 feet deep. Chu Yang nodded and praised, "Well done." The tribulation's soul instantly beamed with joy when it heard this, and it seemed to be in high spirits, complacent. According to the guidance of the tribulation spirit, Chu Yang first used his primordial qi to press down on this area, so that the originally scattered stones would once again condense into one whole body due to this pressure. Then, he swung his sword down and lifted it up with one hand. The stone slab that weighed tens of thousands of pounds was completely lifted up. As Chu Yang's body fell into this hole, the stone slab above once again fell down silently. Chu Yang held the boulder with one hand, and then his body fell down gracefully. When his body entered the hidden entrance, the boulder fell down just in time. It didn't make a single sound, and it didn't make a single sound. This was a pitch-black passage where one couldn't even see one's own fingers. Yuan Tianjie didn't even place anything like luminous pearls to illuminate the passage. Of course, with Chu Yang's cultivation level, even if the environment was a little darker, Chu Yang's vision would be clear. It wouldn't affect his vision at all. He went straight down, and even made a few turns along the way. According to Chu Yang's estimation, he had already reached a depth of 3,000 feet, but he didn't feel any dampness at all. This situation obviously wasn't something that could be done together. If this happened in Shui Leihan's Eastern Royal Heavens, it would probably be pardonable. Because the Eastern Royal Heavens terrain was higher, and there were many dry areas. But Ink Cloud Heaven was an area with abundant water sources. In some places, one only needed to dig 5 feet deep, and water would gush out. But here, it was already 3,000 feet deep, and yet it was still so dry. That was very strange. Like a whirlwind, Chu Yang went in. After descending another 2,000 feet, he suddenly stopped. Because there was no more path ahead. There were thick stone walls on both sides, but in front of him was a patch of soil mixed with heavy rocks. As far as he could see, there was no more passage at all. Chu Yang stood still and was silent for a while. Since he had spent so much effort to create such a strange secret passage, how could there be no way ahead? There must be a problem. Chu Yang's huge divine sense spread out again, but he unexpectedly found that his divine sense was completely useless in this place. He couldn't detect anything. Tribulation's divine sense came out and tried, but the result was the same. Chu Yang pondered for a while. Suddenly, he pulled out the tribulation sword and slashed at the soil wall in front of him. Poof, poof, poof. Large chunks of soil fell off with the sword. How sharp was the tribulation sword? Using it to dig up soil and rocks was like using a sledgehammer to crack open a hole. But Chu Yang didn't dare to have such extravagant hopes. Since this place was related to the secret of heaven limit, it was destined not to be simple. Indeed, the tribulation sword had only gone 10 feet deep when Chu Yang felt that something was wrong in front of him. It was as if there was an extremely viscous force in front of him that was preventing the calamity sword from moving forward. Even with the sharpness of the calamity sword, it still had an awkward feeling of being unable to use its power. Chu Yang exerted his divine power. Vigorous elemental energy poured into the tribulation sword. He fiercely stabbed the sword, and it was like a hot knife through butter. It was unstoppable, and it forcibly broke through the viscous force. Unexpectedly, just as it broke through, a black fog suddenly emerged from the soil wall in front of him. And the soil that had been cut off by the tribulation sword on the ground actually returned to its original position at this time. In the next moment, the original soil wall slowly transformed into an ink-colored door. The door was tightly shut. Above it, the black fog slowly lingered for a while. Finally, a strange pattern appeared. It vaguely resembled a human face. There was a pair of living black eyes on it, which seemed to be staring at Chu Yang. Chu Yang instinctively felt that this pair of eyes seemed to be somewhat expectant. It seemed to be hoping that he could open the door earlier, or asking if he could open this door. The divine soul of calamity floated closer and observed carefully. Then he said, "Little ancestor, I'm afraid this is the legendary gate of the heavenly devil. It is said that once this gate is opened, no one can enter except for the heavenly devil who set this place up. Even if there is a super expert who forcibly breaks through the gate with his tyrannical strength, everything inside will be destroyed the moment the gate is broken through. It will never be the same again. Little ancestor, don't underestimate him. If you act rashly, I'm afraid." Chu Yang nodded and said lightly, "I know. I have a way to deal with it." As he spoke, he waved his hand, and the tribulation sword left his hand again. This time, the sword was surrounded by green aura. The dense green aura gradually turned into a small vortex, and it fiercely pierced into the heavenly demon gate. It made a crisp sword sound. Don't forcefully break it. Even if you succeed, you will only destroy everything. Before the tribulation spirit finished speaking, he saw that the tribulation sword had already pierced into the gate. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh. He thought to himself, this little ancestor has always been calm, but why is he so impulsive this time? I clearly explained the consequences of forcefully breaking through, but he still chose to do so. This is really a blunder. However, the heavenly demon gate, which should have been completely annihilated after being forcefully broken through by external forces, did not have any reaction. He couldn't help but feel a little strange and focused on it. Could it be that this little ancestor's attack was too weak and couldn't cause any damage to the heavenly demon gate, so it didn't collapse? When he took a closer look, he couldn't help but turn pale with fright. The result was actually like this. The green aura on the tribulation sword flowed as if it was alive. The heavenly demon chi on the heavenly demon gate gradually gathered toward the tribulation sword like rivers flowing into the sea. The tribulation sword was like an ocean that could hold all the water in the world. It didn't reject anything that came, and all the heavenly demon chi was transformed into the green aura of the sword and quietly absorbed into the sword. Its power was so profound that it was unimaginable. Gradually, the heavenly demon gate on the wall became much dimmer. The tribulation spirit looked at the shocking effect caused by the tribulation sword and couldn't help but open his mouth wide, unable to close it. He had always known that this little ancestor's sword was the best divine weapon in the world, but he didn't expect it to have such a terrifying devouring power. It would be fine if it devoured other things, but it could even devour such dense heavenly demon chi bit by bit. Furthermore, it was using the method of devouring all the heavenly demon chi to dissolve the heavenly demon gate. The idea was undoubtedly brilliant. The tribulation spirit was greatly surprised by the change in front of him. After the tribulation sword's devouring power dissolved the first part of the heavenly demon chi, the devouring power became even stronger. In the end, it formed a huge vortex that could be seen with the naked eye. He swallowed all the heavenly devil chi that formed the heavenly devil gate and sucked it in. Calamity's soul got a little closer, and he actually felt that his cultivation was being affected. He was faintly moving towards the sword. That feeling was actually similar to when he was manipulated by that person on that day. Even though there was still a considerable gap between them, that feeling was very similar. It was an ultimate targeted might that could completely obliterate his body and soul, and it was a complete counter to him. As soon as he thought up to here, the Calamity's soul couldn't help but be terrified, and he let out a strange cry before retreating 30 back. Only then was he able to completely escape this devouring force. For a time, his hair stood on end, and there was still a lingering fear in his heart. Chapter 23:42. The soul secretly swore, "Damn it, I was almost caught in the crossfire. I'll never go near this magical sword again." The system had cultivated for such a long time to reach its current level. If it was inexplicably swallowed by this strange sword, it wouldn't even be able to find a place to cry. It would really be too tragic. After a short while, Chu Yang shook his wrist, and the tribulation sword flew back into Chu Yang's palm with a clear cry. The gate of heavenly demons in front of him finally opened to the sides silently, following which, a soft and misty light slowly seeped out. Looking around, all he could see was a dazzling light in front of him. Along the way, it was unknown how many night luminescent pearls were embedded in it. Every one of them was as big as a child's fist, and every one of them was a rare treasure. Seeing such a rare treasure, Chu Yang naturally didn't stand on ceremony. He kept all the luminous pearls he passed into the tribulation space. It would be a waste not to take advantage of such a fortune. Moreover, Chu Yang knew that these luminous pearls didn't look very special, but the light they emitted had a faint purple-blue halo. This meant that these luminous pearls were all produced in the deep sea. These luminous pearls weren't ordinary clam pearls or eastern pearls. They were extremely rare crab pearls. Illumination was only one of their functions. The biggest function of these pearls was to assist in cultivation. Yuan Tianjie placed so many crab pearls here to form a special array, which made it easy to absorb a large amount of the world's essence energy. But Chu Yang wouldn't be as wasteful as Yuan Tianjie, because Yuan Tianjie was ultimately a heavenly demon and couldn't directly absorb the world's essence energy. But Chu Yang was a genuine human. He could completely convert all these luminous pearls into pure cultivation. It would allow his skills to rise to the next level. He had just opened the gate of heavenly demons, and he already had such a harvest. How could Chu Yang not be happy? This was simply a big pie falling from the sky. If Yuan Tianjie didn't get it, and any other human expert got it, these crab pearls would have turned into powder long ago. Yuan Tianjie is really a good person. Even if he's dead, he still has something left for me. Chu Yang sighed as he walked in. There are such good treasures, but you can't use them and can only stare at them helplessly. But you've left them all to me. I'll gladly accept them. Chu Yang had harvested more than 3,000 crab pearls in this short journey of a few thousand feet. Such a huge number made Chu Yang's scalp go numb even though he was the one directly involved. This was because there were simply too many of them. It had to be known that not every crab could produce such a quantity of crab pearls. Only dragon crabs that lived thousands of meters deep in the ocean could produce such a quantity of crab pearls. As long as it was a dragon crab, it was said that it could fight a flood dragon alone. Most importantly, even dragon crabs only had a possibility of nurturing this kind of crab pearl. Roughly 3,000 dragon crabs would only be able to produce one crab pearl at most. Looking at the 3,000 plus crab pearls here, Yuan Tianjie must have exterminated all the dragon crab clans in the Heaven Imperial Court to be able to obtain so many, right? Sure enough, on one side of the stone wall, there were words carved by Yuan Tianjie. Now, it seemed that Chu Yang could also feel Yuan Tianjie's dissatisfaction. Slaughtering all the 13 seas in the world to obtain 3,100 pearls. The 10,000 crab pearls that I asked for is still far from enough. How can it not make people feel resentful? When anger rises, they will be slaughtered cleanly. Sure enough, Yuan Tianjie had really exterminated all the dragon crab clans. It turned out that the Heavenly Demon Clan was not only the mortal enemy of the human race, but any living creature that could be targeted by them had the possibility of being exterminated. The Heavenly Demons were actually the common enemy of all living creatures. You're really an idiot. You could have just left some seeds and killed another batch of pearls after a few 100,000 years. Your lifespan is so long, but you're so impatient. Not to mention other things, just the millions of years that you've been in power, as long as you had a little bit of patience, not to mention 10,000, even 100,000 wouldn't be difficult. Heavenly demons are indeed heavenly demons. Chu Yang scolded angrily. What kind of effect could 10,000 crab pearls produce? If there were really 10,000 crab pearls for him to use, Yuan Tianjie could totally set up a 10,000 pearls formation. In one night, he could use the formation to completely absorb the spiritual energy of the crab pearls, doubling his cultivation. But if the quantity was insufficient, then it would be another matter. The 10,000 pearls formation must have 10,000 pearls, not even a single one. It was precisely because of this that Chu Yang was so angry. Yuan Tianjie, you impatient bastard, why didn't you collect enough pearls before letting me take advantage of you? It was also because Chu Yang was filled with anger. In a moment of confusion, he neglected the benefits in front of him. If Yuan Tianjie had really collected enough pearls, he would have used them all up on the same day. How would he be able to take advantage of him? More importantly, it wasn't just that he couldn't take advantage of Yuan Tianjie. If Yuan Tianjie's cultivation had really doubled, perhaps none of the brothers would have survived the battle that day. Even Yuan Tianjie might not have to reveal his identity. The gap was so huge. If Yuan Tianjie's cultivation had doubled again, he could completely be comparable to a saint monarch, or even better. Even if a saint monarch was the #1 person in the imperial court and his strength was extraordinary, he still wasn't as strong as Zhu Niho. After venting his anger for a while, Chu Yang realized that he was venting his anger out of boredom. He was quite discouraged. He had no choice but to continue walking forward. However, he was immediately stunned when he pushed open another door. What he saw in front of him was an unusually large area. Not to mention that there were at least 8 other doors connected to different places. Just this hall alone was full of splendor and extremely luxurious. Hundreds of huge crab pearls the size of a human head were inlaid all around. In the center, there was also a star jade the size of a fist. That star jade continued to refract tens of thousands of rays of starlight. The moment he walked in, it was as if he had walked into the most brilliant starry sky. Star jade was a special kind of jade formed at the core of a star after countless years. This was a super heavenly treasure that could only be encountered but not sought. It was a top-notch treasure that lived up to its name. No wonder Yuan Tianjie's cultivation progress is so fast. So he has such a good thing as his backing. Chu Yang thought to himself. In the center, there was even a huge cushion formed purely by souls of purple crystal. Obviously, Yuan Tianjie sat here to cultivate. This guy is really a celestial emperor. He's so much more extravagant than I am. Joy appeared on Chu Yang's face. His previous anger had completely disappeared, because all these things now seemed to already belong to Chu. The things were all here. Chu Yang was not in a hurry to collect them. Instead, he pushed open the other 8 doors one by one. These 8 doors must be the most precious collection of Yuan Tianjie's life, as well as the greatest secret of his life. Even Chu Yang's eyes shone with a dazzling light. Treasures were indeed precious, but they were only things that could be obtained conveniently. What Chu Yang really cared about was whether he could actually find the answer he wanted from here. For example, how did Yuan Tianjie enter the Heaven Imperial Court back then and even reach his current position? Another example, what role did Yuan Tianjie play in the Purple Clouds Heavens incident back then? Mastermind, accomplice, or something else? Another example, what exactly did Yuan Tianjie do for the Heavenly Fiend clan in these million years? This was what Chu Yang was most concerned about right now. The first storeroom was filled with precious materials piled up like a mountain. Every one of them was something that only existed in legends. They could be said to be the best materials. Chu Yang waved his hand and summoned Calamity Sword. He gave an order. Other than leaving some for me to use in forging weapons, the rest are all yours. Devour to your heart's content." Calamity's sword let out a joyful sword cry. It flew over quickly and ate to its heart's content. It seemed that it had not devoured to its heart's content like this for a long time. How could the divine sword not be elated? Chu Yang walked into the second storeroom. As expected, this was the storehouse where Yuan Tianming used to practice martial arts. However, what made Chu Yang disappointed was that although the things inside were also rare treasures, he couldn't use them at all. Because the things inside were all top-grade magic crystals. The Heavenly Fiend Crystal was a unique product of the Heavenly Fiend continent. It had a beneficial effect on the demon body. This kind of magic crystal stone was also divided into different grades. The ones that Yuan Tianjie had were all top-grade goods. However, for a human like Chu Yang, they were completely useless. The higher the grade, the more useless they were. Not only were they not beneficial, they were even harmful. Chu Yang sighed. He waved his hand casually and put them into the calamity space. After all, it was shameful to waste them. He would take them out and show them to Tan Tan later. If they were useful to him, then these things would belong to Tan Tan. If even Tan Tan could not use them, then he would have to let Calamity's sword devour them all. Calamity's sword did not care about whether it was magic crystals or purple crystals. The third storeroom was filled with a large number of elixirs. Chu Yang's expression did not change. He waved his hand and put them all into the calamity space. This indifference was not pretentious. With Chu Yang's collection theory, although these elixirs that he obtained from Yuan Tianjie were all top-grade elixirs, compared to the heaven-defying Heaven-Earth Mystery Yellow Fruit and the Nether Hell Fruit, they were really not too great. How could Chu Yang be shocked by these elixirs when he already had them in front of him? Chu Yang did not care about them. However, the 3 elixirs in the calamity space were overjoyed when they saw so many elixirs falling from the sky. One by one, they rushed over with their short legs. They were beaming with joy as they took them back. Then, they planted them into the elixir field one by one. As for the elixirs that had lost their vitality, the elixirs were all absorbed by the elixirs and turned into powder. Previously, Chu Yang had used a large number of elixirs to accelerate the growth of heavy elixirs in order to increase the odds of victory in the battle against the devil. This had made the 3 elixirs very distressed. Now that there were so many elixirs to replenish them, it was naturally a great joy. I was extremely unlucky. In the morning, I was eating with my wife's best friend. That woman was wearing a necklace and happily showing it off. She said that her husband had bought it for her on Women's Day. At that moment, my wife looked at me with resentment in her eyes. It made my hair stand on end. Women's Day? Which day is it? I don't remember at all. What a tragedy. At the same time, I was depressed in my heart. Women have too many festivals. Where are the festivals that belong to men? Valentine's Day, Women's Day, Spring Festival, Lantern Festival, 7th of July, birthdays. I need to buy gifts for all of them. Damn, it's too difficult for men. Just these festivals alone are like a mountain of knives and a sea of fire. If it continues like this, I won't be able to afford to find a wife in the future. So, I made a bold decision. I must have a pair of twin daughters. Damn it, I'll just sit at home and wait for the betrothal gifts in the future. Who is it? Where's the gift? Damn it, you came without a gift? Get out. Big brother, Nenin, who gave you the gift? Quickly hand it over. Second brother, hand it over quickly. I'm waiting for you to spend money. Chapter 2343. This batch of elixirs from Yuan Tianjie could only be considered top grade. Only a small part of it was supreme grade elixirs. But what surprised Chu Yang and made him so happy that he couldn't close his mouth was that as the elixirs absorbed the essence of the elixirs, most of the elixirs that were beyond their abilities turned into high-grade heavy elixirs, which gradually piled up into a small hill. The tribulation space was originally filled with the power of great elixirs. Now that the elixirs had been in there for a long time, they had evolved and had the unique medicinal properties of great elixirs. They no longer needed to deliberately pursue supreme-grade elixirs. As long as there was enough external medicinal power, they could transform and fuse them into heavy elixirs effortlessly. The only thing that made Chu Yang feel a little depressed was that these heavy elixirs were all rolling out of the elixir's nostrils. This was somewhat disgusting. But Minister Chu immediately told himself fiercely, as long as I can improve my cultivation, not to mention those heavy elixirs rolling out of their nostrils, even if they come out of their eyes. Vomit, vomit, vomit. Minister Chu was the first to vomit. He really couldn't take it. In the fourth storeroom, there was only an empty table. There was a black shelf on the table, and on the shelf, there was a card that was as black as ink. On the card, there was a word engraved. He carefully identified the word, but Chu Yang didn't recognize it. He only felt that the shape was strange. This word didn't look like the word Heavenly Imperial at all. He looked at the back, but there was a word, command, engraved on it. This should be a command token. Once he picked up that command token, Chu Yang felt a magical power. It also let him instantly know what kind of command token this was. Heavenly Demon Command Token. The personal command token of the Flying Devil King, proof of identity. Chu Yang's eyes turned and he put it away. If I deliberately let Mo Tianji use this thing, it might be of great use. If someone can become the Flying Devil King with this command token, that would be too interesting. Under Mo Tianji's control, what is impossible? Chu Yang muttered to himself. But then he couldn't help but laugh. If it was really so easy to become the Flying Devil King, then the so-called extraterrestrial demons wouldn't be so difficult to deal with. After Chu Yang opened the fifth storeroom, it immediately closed. His face was deathly pale. Inside were piles of bones and endless flesh and blood. The entire warehouse was piled up like a mountain, and blood flowed like a river. He didn't know how many people Yuan Tianjie had killed here to have such a scale. Chu Yang could clearly feel that all the flesh and blood here should have come from human experts. Moreover, if it wasn't the heart, then it was the other 5 internal organs. On one of its hearts, there was a bite mark. Half of it had been bitten off. The extraterrestrial demons are indeed a bunch of complete scumbags. Even death cannot wipe out their crimes. Their deaths are not worth pitying. Chu Yang gritted his teeth and resisted the strong urge to retch. After he came out, he casually lit a fire and burned the entire storehouse red. All the flesh and organs inside had been reduced to ashes. The items in the first storeroom seemed to be a little interesting. There were many shelves inside, and on the shelves were countless bottles and jars. Inside, there were countless pills. Chu Yang didn't even look at them as he collected them all. He was going to hand it over to Chu Lu, or to study its specific attributes. The seventh storeroom turned out to be a study. But the books in this study weren't books of sages, but countless cultivation technique manuals and secret cultivation manuals. Many of the books had been flipped through until they were tattered. From this, it could be seen that Yuan Tianjie had really put a lot of effort into this. But when he reached the 8th storeroom, which was originally thought to be the last room, it was actually another heavenly demon gate. This heavenly demon gate made Chu Yang excited again. Perhaps Yuan Tianjie's true secret was hidden inside. Calamity Sword was recalled by Chu Yang again, and it began the process of devouring the demonic aura again. He had already experienced it once, and it was a Calamity Sword that had greatly increased in power. This time, he was naturally even more familiar with the process. It didn't take long to crack this heavenly demon gate. Then, without waiting for Chu Yang's instructions, it shook its head and wagged its tail, turning into a stream of light and entering the storeroom to continue devouring. To Calamity Sword, this kind of heavenly demon chi was a very rare tonic. It was rare for its master to be so generous, so how could it not devour to its heart's content? Chu Yang stepped into this most mysterious gate. Looking up, he saw a piece of writing. This writing was arrogant, and one could tell at a glance that it was written by Yuan Tianjie himself. Moreover, the content of this writing was very vulgar, but it also had some profound meaning. The so-called Heavenly Imperial Court Saint is just a ***. These were the words written by Yuan Tianjie here, full of heartfelt disdain, and also full of indescribable pride. In addition, there was also a kind of disdain that came from the bones. The high and mighty heavenly imperial court saint that everyone in the world looked up to was actually just a *** in the eyes of the heavenly demon gate saint? Wasn't this evaluation a little too unexpected? This contrast made Chu Yang's heart beat violently for a moment, and it aroused even more intense interest. Chu Yang was even a little nervous. What exactly was this xiansu? He vaguely had a premonition that some mysteries that had been buried deep for millions of years were about to appear in front of him. Even with Chu Yang's cultivation, when he realized this, he still couldn't help but take a deep breath. Then he couldn't wait to step in. He couldn't wait to take a peek at this secret. In the last 8th room, other than the writing that could be seen the moment he entered, there were no other facilities that belonged to a normal room. It could be said to be an extremely simple room. The only things that were there were only stacks of paper and small balls of ashes in the corner. Obviously, Yuan Tianjie had destroyed something. Chu Yang very carefully collected those papers one by one and looked at them carefully, hoping to find some clues. However, he very gloomily discovered that the things recorded on these papers were completely worthless. Because most of them were Yuan Tianjie's scolding words. He scolded the heavenly imperial court, scolded the heavenly emperor, scolded Shui Leihan, scolded the 7 Stars Guard, scolded the demon empress, and so on and so on. Almost all the high-level figures and super experts in the heavenly imperial court, almost all of them, every single one of them, had a deep grudge against Yuan Tianjie. Chu Yang was afraid that he would miss something, so he looked at it carefully. In the end, he was so confused that he even picked up the papers that were thrown on the ground to look at them, but he still didn't find anything valuable. Chu Yang frowned. Logically speaking, this should be where Yuan Tianjie's biggest secret was. Why couldn't he find it? Could it be that this was just a place for Yuan Tianjie to vent his dissatisfaction? No, Yuan Tianjie was definitely not such a superficial person. How could a person who could hide in a different world and almost climb to the top of a different world be a superficial person? If this was indeed Yuan Tianjie's secret room, then there must be something here that he had overlooked. For example, there was another heavenly demon gate here? Once the thought came to his mind, he immediately put it into action. Chu Yang once again started to search. He changed the target of his search from the equipment in the room to the structure of the room, looking for the possibility that there might be other spaces. He used the Calamity Sword to probe every corner of the room. Finally, in an extremely inconspicuous corner on the upper left corner, he found an unusually subtle but even more complicated and detailed secret heavenly demon gate. Even if Yuan Tianjie opened this gate personally, he would need to go through a lot of complicated procedures before he could open it. However, in front of the devouring power of the heavenly demon Qi, it was easily opened by brute force like snow melting under the scorching sun. Although the divine soul of Calamity had seen it twice, it was still stunned and frightened when it saw this scene again. It couldn't help but think, if Yuan Tianjie knew that the secret mechanism he set up with great effort was so easily cracked by someone else, and in an extremely barbaric and violent way, I wonder if he would be so depressed that he would hit his head and kill himself? The Calamity Sword easily cracked the last heavenly demon gate with brute force. Chu Yang carefully reached in and searched. There was indeed another secret item inside. It was a thick book, but just from the thickness of the tentacles, there should be a lot of things recorded in it. Chu Yang only opened it and glanced at it. Then he immediately closed it and put it into his pocket. Then, without any hesitation, he immediately left this place. He even completely blocked all his aura. The devouring power of the Calamity Sword completely devoured the heavenly demon Qi in this entire space. Then, Chu Yang's own spiritual power and pure cultivation were activated to the limit together. As he retreated step by step, the original secret room of Yuan Tianjie actually turned into hard rock step by step. And the rocks in all directions were gradually squeezing in this direction. All the treasures here had already been swept clean by Chu Yang. Naturally, Chu Yang turned around and left without any reluctance. Behind him, heavy squeezing sounds could still be heard. When Chu Yang snuck into Mo Tianji's room 70 miles away like a shooting star, that secret room had completely turned into a solid ground. He believed that even the most brilliant expert would not be able to detect that this used to be a warehouse or a secret room. This was because, under the powerful devouring power of the Calamity Sword, all traces and smells of the heavenly demons or humans that had once stayed here were swept clean. All the life, death, and smell of blood also disappeared without a trace. Even the messy flesh, the scaffolding, and the useless papers had been completely crushed by the pressure and melted into the soil and rocks. Chapter 2344. To be able to grasp the meaning of the music just by listening to it, as expected of Mo Tianji. Chu Yang was also using a sound transmission technique at this moment. He quietly said, apart from a batch of materials, the most important thing is the relevant records left behind by Yuan Tianjia. This matter was not a small matter. Even though the two of them were completely at ease in their own territory, they were still extremely cautious and used telepathy at the same time to discuss this matter. Hearing Chu Yang say this, Mo Tianji immediately became spirited. Quickly take it out for us to see. Don't tell me you still want to keep it a secret at this time? Mo Tianji took a deep breath. Then, he took the first step and used a method to tightly seal his room with pure spiritual power. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, the soul of the calamity outside immediately turned into a cloud of smoke and formed another layer of protection outside of Mo Tianji's spiritual energy. Under such tight protection, it was believed that even if a super expert like a Saint Monarch came, it would be impossible for them to silently approach and pry into their secrets. However, even under such a well-guarded situation, Mo Tianji and Chu Yang still used telepathy to eliminate any possibility of a sneak attack. Even the light on the table was blown out by Mo Tianji. Only then did Chu Yang carefully take out the book from his bosom. With the eyesight of the two of them, it was naturally not difficult to see in such darkness. However, extinguishing the candle and returning to darkness could minimize the possibility of being noticed to the greatest extent. The proudest thing of a lifetime. This might be the name of Yuan Tianjia's little book, or it might be his greatest wish and his proudest achievement. I didn't expect this guy to have the habit of keeping a diary. As a qualified spy, this habit is not too good. As long as there is material evidence, one's secrets will not be complete. Mo Tianji smiled and casually teased. This isn't a diary. Chu Yang squinted his eyes. This bastard has lived for who knows how long. He must have lived for at least several million years. If he were to record everything day by day, he wouldn't even be able to fit all 8 storerooms. Even if he were to record 1 entry per year, he would have recorded several million entries. That's quite a terrifying number. It's not too much of a daily number. Mo Tianji chuckled. At this moment, the two of them were actually laughing a little wretchedly. After opening the title page, it recorded the beginning of the glorious journey of Yuan Tianjia's life. He spent the rest of his life in the Shengma Dalu, a member of the Flying Demon clan. At the age of 15, he was hailed as the genius of the Flying Demon clan. At the age of 30, he was hailed as the #1 expert of the younger generation of the Flying Demon clan. He was high-spirited and full of mettle, with no regard for others. I have lived for over 100 years, and my cultivation has already reached the level of an earth demon. In the last 30,000 years of the Flying Demon clan, I am the only one who has managed to reach this level. Thus, I shouldered the heavy responsibility of entering the colorful world. Mo Tianji had already flipped 3 pages by this time. He couldn't help but sigh. This guy's generation is truly glorious. Big brother, you were only slightly stronger than him back then. Chu Yang nodded and said, the colorful world that he mentioned should be this heavenly imperial court, right? Mo Tianji nodded. The corners of his mouth curled up into a mocking smile. Colorful world? It's a pity that the extraterrestrial demons will never be able to take over this colorful world. The so-called flower will forever exist in their imagination. The two of them continued to read. The demon lord sealed my demonic energy and traveled such a long distance to come here. Along the way, I have been chivalrous and righteous. Speaking of the words chivalrous and righteous, I really feel very sad. Isn't chivalrous and righteous killing people? Isn't it an executioner? Isn't it a body full of sin and hands full of blood? It's nothing more than a reasonable and righteous killing that bears the moral standards of most people. I really don't know whether to laugh or cry about the concept of the people in the heavenly imperial court. The so-called smart, stupid, and despicable are nothing more than this. After reading this paragraph, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji sighed at the same time. The next dozens of pages were all about chivalrous and righteous. They were all about helping some people who were of value and killing all the enemies. On the contrary, they were able to gain the sincere support of those people who were previously rescued. Obviously, Yuan Tianjie thought that this experience was very satisfying, very comforting, and very funny. Therefore, he wrote a little more and took up quite a lot of space. Finally, my pseudonym, Yuan Tianjie, was hailed as the #1 young hero of the Dark Cloud continent. My reputation rose and my name shook the world. When I received such an honor, the shock in my heart was really incomparable. This is too simple and too. Damn it, when we read this, the shock in our hearts was also incomparable. We also didn't know how to phrase it. What the hell is this? Isn't this too dark and humorous? Chu Yang and Mo Tianji cursed angrily in their hearts at the same time. After that, I continued to wander the Jianghu. Slowly, I actually had my own foundation and many subsidiary forces. I didn't even know where many of them came from. And my cultivation also soared all the way. There were some cultivation treasures that people took the initiative to deliver to me without any effort. This is simply an incredible thing in the Xingma Dalu. Such treasures can't be obtained without violence. But here, it's so natural and logical. Looking back, as long as something that can increase cultivation appeared in the Xingma Dalu, many people would fight to the death. No matter who the opponent is, even if it's a biological father or an elder, as long as they have the ability, they definitely won't give in. But here, I thought for a long time, but I still couldn't understand it. Perhaps my experience is not enough. This paragraph made Chu Yang and Mo Tianji even more speechless. No wonder the heavenly demons are so scary. Under such an atmosphere, as long as they don't die and grow up, they are natural demons of demons, great demons that look down on all demons. Mo Tianji thought until here, but this is a common weakness of human nature or demonic nature. Maybe we can make good use of it. Chu Yang thought of another aspect. It's just that the time wasn't ripe yet, so he could only suppress it in his heart and didn't say it out. After returning to the clan, when I came out for the 4th time, my cultivation had already reached the level of heavenly demon. It was also at this time that I accidentally met someone. A person that I definitely didn't expect to be able to affect the direction of my life. Seeing this, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji's breathing became heavy at the same time. This person was undoubtedly a key. It could be the opportunity for Yuan Tianji to become a part of the Xingma Dalu. But who was this person? That was an absolutely asymmetrical battle. Almost 500 people joined forces to besiege one person. Everyone on the besieging side was a top expert. And the person who was besieged didn't admit defeat or retreat. He fought all the way. Although he was severely injured in the end, he still broke out of the encirclement and escaped. This person's cultivation had already reached an earth-shattering level. Only later did I know that he was actually the #1 expert in the heavenly imperial court at that time. Seeing him break out of the encirclement and escape, I followed him all the way. I faintly felt that if this person survived, he would be a huge obstacle for my heavenly demon clan to enter the heavenly imperial court. Right now, he was severely injured. Maybe I could take this opportunity to kill him. I lost him right from the start. I chased him for 3,000 miles, but I couldn't find any trace of him. However, life is so special. It's as if everything is predestined. Just when I gave up on my original goal and was on my way back, I unexpectedly met this person again. His previous self was seriously injured, and he was hiding in a big lake, hiding all his aura. And when I went to the lake to drink water, it was when he finally exhausted his vital signs after being severely injured. He couldn't hold his breath and came out. And it was at that time that I realized how childish and ridiculous my previous thoughts were. Even though he was severely injured, I still couldn't resist at all. Almost immediately, I was captured by him and he took away all the healing medicine from me. In the following period of time, he treated me like his servant and ordered me to do everything for him. He even placed restrictions on my body. He waited until his injuries improved a little before he let me go. It was only at that time that I knew his name. He was called Cloud Master. He was the #1 expert in the Heavenly Imperial Court. Seeing this, Chu Yang and Imo Tianji's bodies shook at the same time. Cloud Master was the name of the saint. It turned out that Yuan Tianjie had already met him before he became a Saint Lord. They had such a past. In the beginning, I was very afraid that he would discover my identity as a heavenly demon. So, I pretended to be humble and tried to get on his good side. However, as we interacted with each other for a long time, we slowly became familiar with each other. I gradually realized that this Cloud Master was a very ambitious person and I was also an ambitious person. Perhaps it was because we were like-minded and our ideas were similar, we actually became close friends. Thus, the two of us started to work together to unify the Heaven Imperial Court. We slowly started to discuss and form a plan. Seeing this, Chu Yang and Imo Tianji were full of cold sweat. Cloud Master's ambition was to unify the Heaven Imperial Court. And Yuan Tianjie's ambition was to annex the Heaven Imperial Court and make the Heaven Imperial Court be enslaved by the other races. The two couldn't be confused at all. But the two of them worked together just like that. Under the circumstances where the saint didn't know Yuan Tianjie's true identity, the two of them started to unify the martial world? Could this be said to be absurd? Or absurd? Or was it absurd? 5 years later, the two of us met again. Both of us had greatly improved. Under the binding of our interests, Cloud Master and I swore an oath of blood and became brothers of life and death. Hee. Chapter 2345. I returned to the clan to report this matter. The higher-ups of the clan all thought that this was a great opportunity to take over the Heaven Imperial Court. Thus, I led a few capable clansmen and returned to the Heaven Imperial Court. We wanted to take over our own territory. Because of our mutual interests, we began to intentionally and unintentionally promote each other. Guru Yun's opponents who were difficult to deal with and those who opposed him were all assassinated by me. Meanwhile, Guru Yun was in charge of dealing with my opponents. At the same time, we promoted each other's reputation. Even so, it was just some reputation in the martial world. The effect was very limited. After 500 years, we only gained some reputation. However, at that time, a strange person appeared in the martial world. He was called Know-It-All. This person had the ability to know everything. He actually collected all the information of all the experts above the saint level. Furthermore, the entire Heaven Imperial Court started a grand ranking battle. The battle for the #1 expert in the world, the battle for the top 10 experts, the ranking battle, behind the mysterious name Know-It-All, Yuan Tianming wrote, "I suspect that there's a high chance that this person is Guru Yun's incarnation." Throughout the entire process, the person who benefited the most was Guru Yun himself. Reading up to this point, Imo Tianji's face turned pale. However, he continued reading. The martial world was once again filled with people who didn't want to win and didn't like fame. At that time, the only daughter of the #1 financial magnate, the #1 beauty in the martial world, Shui Xian released the news that she would marry the #1 expert in the world. When this news was released, the entire Heaven Imperial Court was in an uproar. Other than fame, there was also the temptation of benefits. Who could resist such fame and fortune? Cloud Master came to me first. He said that he wanted to become the #1 expert in the world and hoped that I could help him. It was only later that I found out that Shui Xian was already Cloud Master's woman at that time. For Cloud Master's ambition, she released this news. However, this news was irresistible to the martial world people who didn't know the inside story. Chu Yang and Imo Tianji sighed at the same time. The throne of the #1 expert in the world. the unparalleled beauty of the number one beauty in the world, and the wealth of the number one financial magnate. Who would be able to resist such a temptation? Even if there were people who could resist such temptation, as long as their strength was seen as an opponent, they would be forced into this competition. Therefore, this was a battle that only the mediocre could avoid. No matter how strong one was, as long as they entered, they would never be able to escape. They could only fight to the end. Under the combined efforts of me and Guru Yun managed to defeat all the other competitors and claim the title of number one. A month later, he married Xue Xian and rightfully took over the wealth of the world's number one conglomerate, as well as the equally enormous Jianghu forces. There was also something that I had expected. On the day of their wedding, before they entered the bridal chamber, Master Yun gave me a mission to kill Xue Xian's father, Xue Chenyang. A month later, Xue Chenyang died by my hands. This is really within my expectations. Because only with Xue Chenyang's death, Master Yun can immediately take over the Xue family's property and no one can stop him. Based on this reason, how can Xue Chenyang not die? Sweat appeared on Chu Yang's forehead. After marrying Master Yun's daughter, he gave the order to kill his father-in-law before entering the bridal chamber. Moreover, this father-in-law had already given his all for his hegemony and helped him to the best of his ability. This Master Yun, this saint, is really capable of doing this. At the same time, because of Xue Chenyang's accidental death, Master Yun used this as an excuse to take revenge for his father-in-law. He wiped out the forces of the extreme heaven one by one. This process of wiping out the forces lasted for more than 1,300 years. Master Yun finally became the only strong person in the extreme heaven, the de facto ruler. If it weren't for the fact that we got along so well and knew so much about each other, I think I would have become Master Yun's must-kill target long ago. Of course, he must have thought that I would have a backup plan. If I were to die, his secret would be exposed as well. Knowing each other's biggest secret might be the most difficult thing to break. At this point, even with Chu Yang's and Imo Tianji's composure, cold sweat appeared on their foreheads as they sighed inexplicably. They didn't need to continue reading to guess why the saint was willing to distort the truth and testify for Yuan Tianjia. The reason was mostly because of this. Yuan Tianjia really knew too many of the saint's secrets. The connection between the two of them definitely couldn't be broken. Master Yun's ambition continued to expand. He wasn't willing to just control the extreme heaven. Thus, he started to plan the battle of the 10 celestial emperors. As long as the heroes were capable, they could become the master of a heaven. And at this time, Master Yun had unparalleled wealth, unparalleled strength, and unparalleled power to proclaim himself as only me saint. He was above the other 10 celestial emperors. He also promised that if anyone was dissatisfied and rebelled, he could mobilize the army to annihilate them. At that time, Master Yun's strength and power were already fully deserving of the title of number one in the world. Under his guidance, the selections of the various heavens and earth finally carried out vigorously. However, there were several unforeseen events. Just as the Saint Monarch was placing his trusted subordinates in various places and was preparing to secretly take over the 10 directions heaven and earth, some damned valiant fellows appeared out of nowhere. Xue Leihan and Zi Hao belong to different heavens and earth, but they are sworn brothers. Once the two of them join forces, they are invincible. Even though Master Yun is the number one person in the world, he is still somewhat fearful and wary of the two of them. And both of them see the saint as their opponent. They have joined forces several times to battle the saint. Back then, when the saint was severely injured, the main force of the besiegers was Zi Hao. That was the only time in the saint's life that he was in a perilous situation. Master Yun, who became the number one person in the imperial court, was invincible. The only thing he was worried about was that the two of them would join forces to deal with him. But there was no way to split them apart. Zi Hao once said that the saint was nothing more than that. Master Yun saw him as a great threat. Although Zi Hao and Xue Leihan are brothers, after the news of the battle of the heavenly sovereigns spread, the two of them belonged to different heavens and earth. They had no choice but to separate and participate in the battle of the heavenly sovereigns in their respective heavens and earth. The two of them were very powerful and were only slightly inferior to the saint. Naturally, no one could match them. The people sent by the sage were all killed in the arena, especially the Zishao heavens, which was the weakest realm at that time. The Cloud Master specially sent out his own younger brother, Yunyue, to compete for the position. He originally thought that it would be a piece of cake, but he didn't expect that Zihao would dismember him in the arena. He died with his body smashed into pieces, his body and soul destroyed. Yunyu's wife, children, and subordinates went to seek revenge from Zihao. However, due to their ruthless and despicable methods, they finally angered Zihao and were all killed by him. When Yunyu heard the news, he was so devastated that he vomited blood and fainted in the extreme heaven. However, Master Yun did things secretly. Zihao didn't know who he had killed at all. At this point, Chu Yang and Imo Tianji were speechless. The battle of Zishao heavens, perhaps, this was part of the reason? Zihao was an old rival of Master Yun who had been at odds with him for thousands of years. Moreover, he was the one who obstructed Master Yun's plan to truly unify the heavenly imperial court. He even killed his own brother and the murderer of his entire family. Master Yun's cultivation was already the #1 in the world at that time, but he was still so agitated by this news that he vomited blood and fainted. From this, one could see how much he valued this brother of his. The hatred between him and Zihao, the heavenly emperor of the purple clouds, probably came from this. Moreover, both new and old hatred surged in his heart, growing deeper and deeper. There was no way to resolve it. In the end, the Eastern Royal Sky fell into the hands of Shui Leihan, who was just as strong. As for the Demon Emperor Sky, there was also an accident. Originally, the Lord of the Demon race had already been assassinated by Master Yun, and his cultivation was crippled. However, no one expected that this demon would unexpectedly use the most sacred and cruel method of passing on the power of all 8 experts of the demon race. He imbued all the power of the demon race's 8 great experts into the demon empress, and even transferred the demon lord's crippled cultivation to the demon empress. As such, the demon race created a brilliant super expert out of thin air. She suppressed all the heroes and became the master of the demon emperor Sky, and also the only female expert after Juni. Other than that, the Daoyuo heaven, Buddha heaven, and the Western heavens also had problems. Super experts from each of the 3 heavens appeared in the mortal world. The people sent by Master Yun were all killed. And in that battle, the ink cloud heaven was full of experts and strong enemies. Master Yun personally came to help and finally helped me successfully obtain the position of Heavenly Emperor of the Ink Cloud Heaven. However, it was also after that battle that Master Yun finally discovered my true identity. But at that time, I had already been conferred the title of Heavenly Emperor of the Ink Cloud Heaven by him. Master Yun didn't do anything to me. Instead, he floated away. Until now, he hadn't set foot in the Ink Cloud Heaven for 1,000,000 years. Perhaps he had already used me up, but he was afraid that I would leave behind a counterattack, so he wasn't willing to tear off the last layer of friendly face. It's a pity that I haven't used him up yet. Seeing this, Chu Yang and Imo Tianji sighed even more heavily. No wonder, with the saint's ability, how could he not see through Yuan Tianjia's heavenly demon identity after interacting with him for millions of years? Moreover, Yuan Tianjia still had many heavenly demon subordinates working for him. Imo Tianji sighed. It's a pity that when the saint found out about all this, it was already too late. Yuan Tianjia had already grasped too many of his secrets. At the same time that Yuan Tianjia was exposed, his dark deeds would also be exposed. As long as they hid from each other, they wouldn't do anything. I still owe 3 chapters. I've been a little speechless during this period of time. When something happened to my family, some people madly cursed me, saying that I didn't make up for what I owed. You can say these words to others, but you can say them to me. Especially at this time, cursing me is really deranged. Chapter 2346. Yuan Tianji is an extraterrestrial demon. The saint's methods are insidious and cruel. However, Yuan Tianji doesn't dare to expose the saint, and the saint also doesn't dare to expose Yuan Tianji. Thus, they kept each other in check until today. Chu Yang let out a long sigh of relief. The two continued to read. Although there were many changes in the battle of the 10 heavenly emperors, 4 of the 10 heavens and earth still ended up in the hands of the saint. Master Cloud was obviously very dissatisfied with this result. Mo Tianji sneered and said, "There's a big problem with this sentence." Chu Yang was thinking about the relationship between the saint and the extraterrestrial demons. Hearing this, he asked in surprise, "What problem?" "4 of the 10 heavens and earth." Yuan Tianji didn't count his own Mo Yuntian. In other words, he never admitted that he was Master Cloud's subordinate. And Master Cloud. With all these reasons and all these actions, it's no wonder that Yuan Tianji scolded him as a pervert. In my opinion, the saint is not only a pervert, but also a pervert who wants chastity and the world's praise. Mo Tianji sneered mockingly. The two continued to read. Since the 10 heavens and earth were established, the saint divided the place where the 10 heavens and earth connected into an area called domain. Later, because of the existence of the saint, the domain naturally became the new extreme heaven at the core of the heavenly imperial court. And the original extreme heaven became Qi Bei heaven. In the end, there was one more extreme heaven and earth, and it became 11. However, what was ironic was that the original extreme heaven was directly appointed by the saint and didn't go through an official battle of the heavenly emperors. Therefore, in the eyes of the world, there were still only 10 heavens and earth. They didn't recognize the Qi Bei heaven that had been renamed. And the heavenly emperor of the extreme heaven, because of the existence of the saint, also slowly became an ordinary person who didn't receive any attention at all. The ridicule and sneer in Yuan Tianji's words could be said to be extremely thick. Regarding this, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji could only sigh. The two felt as if there was a huge stone in their hearts at this moment, and they almost couldn't breathe. The following content was about how Yuan Tianji developed himself, how he ambushed and framed, how he schemed to gather manpower, and how he got the help of the saint. It was not until the second half of the book that he finally wrote about the invasion of the heavenly demons and the battle of the purple cloud heavens. 1/5 of the land on Shengma Dalu's side suddenly collapsed without warning. That part of the land turned into stardust and completely disappeared into the vast sky. Due to the further compression of the living space, our race felt a sense of impending danger. Although our combat power was not fully recovered and the odds of victory were not high, we still sent out an army and began to attack Purple Cloud Heaven. If we did not attack, we would only be waiting for death. The reason why we chose Purple Cloud Heavens, other than geographical factors, was mainly because the clan understood Zihao and Purple Cloud Heaven's foundation very well, especially the enmity between Zihao and Sage Yun Shangren. Although Zihao became the heavenly emperor, compared to the other heavenly emperors, in the tens of thousands of years that followed, he was restrained in many ways. His strength was relatively weaker. When our army invaded, although Zihao fought with his life on the line and would rather die than retreat, he gradually couldn't hold on. Thus, he sent out the 7 Stars protectors to ask for reinforcements. That Zihao is truly foolish. If we were to talk about the person who wants him dead the most in this world, it's actually not a member of the human race, but a fellow member of the human race, the Sage Monarch Cloud Master. The Sage Monarch Cloud Master has waited for this day for no less than several tens of thousands of years. How could he possibly give Zihao the chance to escape death? On the surface, Yun Shangren took care of everything. Not only did he send people to receive Zihao, he even agreed to send out troops to lure the 5 great protectors to the hinterland of the extreme heaven. Yun Shangren personally killed the 5 great protectors on the peak of the snow mountain. The other 2 had enmity with the demon emperor and the demon empress, so they did not dare to rashly ask for help. They went around the demon emperor's heaven and came to the black cloud heavens to ask for help from me. At this point, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were so angry that they trembled all over, and their limbs turned cold. The hero of the imperial court, the hero who fought alone, was framed and brutally killed just like that. And the reason was only because of personal enmity. This was really an unjust injustice. No wonder Yuan Tianjie said that the great saint is a ***. From this point of view, calling this great saint a **** is a fucking insult to ***. Chu Yang was seething with anger. Yuan Tianjie's handwritten letter was still gloating over Zihao's misfortune as he proudly recorded. The imperial court was invaded by demons, but they asked for help from me, the heavenly demon. This is really the biggest joke in the world. The Purple Cloud Heavenly Army was in a fierce battle, but they were located in a remote area, so the news was relatively isolated. At the first moment, I had already used the power of providence in the Black Cloud Heavens to completely cut off the connection between the Purple Cloud Heavens and the Eastern Royal Heavens. Although this action cost me countless amounts of providence that I had painstakingly accumulated, it was definitely worth it. After that, I even sent people to secretly spread the news that the Purple Cloud Heavenly Demon's invasion was just a rumor. However, Zihao's 7-star protectors had already spread the news quite a lot along the way. There were actually quite a number of people who spontaneously organized to go to the rescue. This was naturally intolerable. Thus, I personally led the experts of my clan to intercept and kill them outside the Purple Cloud Heavens. How could the survival of my clan be destroyed in the hands of some boorish people of the pugilistic world? For several months, corpses littered the plains and rivers of blood flowed before the Purple Cloud Heavens. Isn't that great? Understood. At this moment, the two of them only felt the blood all over their bodies rushing to the top of their heads. For a moment, they were so furious that they felt like their bodies were about to explode. So this was the real truth behind the battle of the Purple Cloud Heavens. No matter how peerless Zihao was, how could he not be defeated when faced with such internal and external troubles? On the outside, there was the entire clan's military strength and absolute strength pressuring the border. On the inside, there was even the number one person in the upper echelons of the imperial court, Lord Shengzong, who was obstructing the reinforcements from the outside. If Zihao didn't lose, that would be the strangest thing. No wonder Shui Leihan didn't send troops all the way back then. So it was all Yuan Tianji's doing. Before the heavenly demon sent troops, he had completely cut off the connection between the Purple Cloud Heavens and the Eastern Royal Heavens at all costs. All along, as the supreme ruler of the Heaven Imperial Court, the Lord Shengzong, who had always been awe-inspiring and righteous, was actually so despicable and shameless behind the scenes, actually doing so many despicable things. He was even the sworn brother of the heavenly demon. Even though he didn't know about it for a long time at the beginning, he eventually found out but didn't do anything. To the Lord Shengzong's status and reputation, this was undoubtedly a kind of betrayal. A kind of betrayal that was close to forgetting one's roots and almost deranged. It definitely couldn't be forgiven. Everything that Yuan Tianji recorded here was an absolute secret that belonged to him. Naturally, there wouldn't be a single word of falsehood. But from here, the path that the Lord Shengzong had taken to his current position was a ready-made encyclopedia of conspiracies and plots. All the sinister, vicious, despicable, and unscrupulous methods to achieve one's goal could be found in this ready-made model. It was definitely the most standard and qualified textbook of conspiracies and plots. Lord Shengzong, Lord Shengzong. Mo Tianji sighed deeply, but his eyes revealed a sincere determination. In the last battle, the Lord Shengzong took action. His purpose was indeed to silence everyone. He had no choice, Chu Yang said indifferently. Actually, he didn't have to take action. At Yuan Tianji's level, extorting a confession by torture is already completely useless. A peerless expert naturally has the strength and persistence of a peerless expert. If he didn't even have this bit of backbone, he wouldn't have achieved his current position. You're wrong about this. Mo Tianji shook his head coldly. It's not only necessary for the Lord Shengzong to take action, but it's also very necessary and extremely important. Because Yuan Tianji may have this kind of backbone and can definitely endure until he dies, but he's ultimately not a real human. If he can create chaos in the Heaven Imperial Court before he dies, It's definitely something that he wants to see. So, if Yuan Tianji really falls into our hands, as long as you ask him at that time, Yuan Tianji will answer truthfully. No matter what you want to know, he'll tell you in detail. Even if you don't ask, he'll find a way to say it himself. So, the Lord Shengzong must take action to silence him. This is an unavoidable result. Mo Tianji took a deep breath and said softly, but with infinite solemnity, Chu Yang, along the way, we've faced enemies that are stronger than the previous one. Now, the enemy that we need to face seems to have climbed to the peak of this world. This sentence was filled with a kind of sigh, but more than that, it was a kind of soaring fighting spirit and pride. Chu Yang pondered for a long time before he slowly said, "No. This is not the peak, far from the peak." Mo Tianji looked at him sideways. "Our enemy has no peak, no limit." Chu Yang grinned. "Tianji, our lives have long been destined to be a life of battle. No matter what's in front of us, as long as we continue to walk and climb, we'll just continue to fight like this. But don't think that the enemy in front of us is the peak. That will only be disadvantageous to us." Mo Tianji was moved and praised from the bottom of his heart. "You're indeed my brother-in-law." Chu Yang rolled his eyes. He was a little unhappy that Mo Tianji called himself uncle. He really wanted to punch that handsome face. "You brat, that's not what your elder said." "Oh right, there's something that I don't know how to tell you." Mo Tianji suddenly became serious, and even a faint blush flashed across his face. It seemed that he didn't know how to open his mouth. "What's the matter? Why are you so hesitant? This isn't like you." Chu Yang couldn't help but be surprised. Mo Tianji pondered for a long time before he stood up and said, "Forget it, let's not talk about it for now." Then he hurriedly walked out. His footsteps seemed a little hurried. Is he really crazy? Chu Yang shook his head and put Yuan Tianji's letter on the table into the tribulation space. Only the tribulation space was the most trustworthy place with the least risk. Chapter 2347. Just as Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were talking in the night sky, a pure white cloud slowly floated over. Then, it stopped above the imperial city and then dispersed. An invisible force had already permeated every inch of the imperial city in an instant and gradually extended downwards. It seemed to be searching for something. This force was like the spring wind and rain, silently nourishing everything but abundant between heaven and earth. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji discussed for an entire night, and this force also searched carefully for an entire night. In the end, no matter how carefully they searched, they still found nothing. The white cloud finally didn't stay any longer. It gradually gathered and floated up slowly towards the endless void. After a while, it disappeared from sight. High up in the sky, there was a faint voice muttering to itself, "The restriction set by Yuan Tianji has disappeared, but nothing is left behind." Could it be that this guy is just using the empty fort strategy to scare me? To scare me for 1,000,000 years? If I had known earlier. But if it isn't the empty fort strategy, then there is indeed a backup plan. Now, it's just that it was taken away by someone earlier. And the person who took away the secret was very careful and eliminated all traces. If that's the case, then the situation is not good. If it was really taken away by someone earlier, then who could it be? Who could it be? The only person who could possibly suspect that Yuan Tianji still has a secret seems to be Mutsong Lan? Or perhaps the bookworm? The painting king? That voice muttered to itself hesitantly, judging and eliminating all possible suspects. For a moment, it couldn't make up its mind. This was too sensitive a time now. Once the suspect made a mistake, it would inevitably alert the enemy. None of those who were qualified to be suspected were simple characters. Imperial capital. At Mutsong Lan's temporary residence, an unexpected guest was welcomed. "Why are you here?" When Mutsong Lan saw who it was, he stood up in surprise. The person who came was his fellow villager and schoolmate. His name was Feng Yang. It was just that later on, the two of them had their own experiences in the martial world. Mutsong Lan had become a high-ranking official in Mo Yuntian and an influential figure, while Feng Yang, because he had followed the saint all the way, He had a meteoric rise and had considerable authority in his hands. These two people could be considered to be of high status and power, but Mu Songlan had never thought that there would be a day when Feng Yang would silently come to his residence without even a greeting. With his status, this was really an extremely unreasonable thing. But now, it was happening right before his eyes. "Old Mu, I came here in secret. If it wasn't for the fact that I had no other choice, why would I be in such a hurry?" Feng Yang revealed a very good-looking smile and a small dimple quietly appeared on his left cheek. This very good-looking smile made Mu Songlan no longer have any doubts. Feng Yang had a handsome appearance, but when he smiled, he would have a girl's dimple. Because of this, Feng Yang was extremely vexed. He always felt that men looked like women and felt rather ashamed. In order to cover up this flaw, he rarely smiled and usually kept a straight face. Therefore, very few people knew of this secret. But because of this, it became a special symbol that proved his identity. Mu Songlan was surprised to see an old friend arrive and was indescribably surprised. He hurriedly welcomed him into the secret room. "Just what is it that would trouble you, old brother, to come here?" Mu Songlan asked. Mu Songlan knew that if this old friend of his didn't have a secret matter, he definitely wouldn't be so impolite and come to visit. "Actually, the reason for my visit is like this. The fact that Yuan Tianjie is a heavenly demon has caused His Majesty, the sage, to be in a very passive situation. Therefore, he ordered me to come here and secretly contact you. He hopes that you can bring back all the books and other things related to Yuan Tianjie that you have on hand. He wants to see if you can find any information that is beneficial to the stability of Tian Quebec. Or perhaps it is related to Yuan Tianjie's accomplices, to give them a fatal blow." Feng Yang replied with a bitter smile. Feng Yang's words were rather vague, but Mu Songlan understood it very clearly. They were all people of the imperial court, and they were all old officials with millions of years of experience. How could they not understand the key points? So it was like this. The sage felt that he had lost face and was somewhat embarrassed. Therefore, he wanted to use a glorious victory to eliminate the negative effects. He naturally felt embarrassed when he slandered Mu Songlan previously. Therefore, he sent Mu Songlan's old classmate. Firstly, it showed his sincerity. Secondly, it didn't make things too awkward for both sides. He understood the other party's intentions, but Mu Songlan was still a little confused. "I understand Lord Sage's meaning, but Yuan Tianjie didn't leave behind any handwritten letters or books, right? He usually doesn't even bother with things like memorials. There are internal affairs officials who are specially in charge of these things. Throughout the year, I don't even see him writing more than a few words. How could there be books or notes?" "There really isn't?" Feng Yang was also startled. "Absolutely not." Mu Songlan was resolute and decisive. "Think about it carefully. This matter is of great importance. The sage is extremely concerned about it. That's right, the sage asked me to pass you a message of sorry." That day, he really didn't expect that his old friend of millions of years would be the incarnation of the heavenly demon. No matter how careful it is, there isn't. Mu Songlan looked at him with a bitter smile. "Feng Yang, think about it. It's fine if I lie to others, but I won't lie to you. Even if I have a grudge against the sage's previous actions, I won't let my personal feelings go to waste. I've followed Yuan Tianjie for more than 1,000,000 years. If there really was such a thing, how could I not know? I've never even heard of such a thing. There really isn't such a thing. As for the sage's apology, there's no need for it. We're all humans. It's hard to avoid being deceived. This is human nature. His Majesty the sage is too polite." Feng Yang couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Mu Songlan was somewhat surprised by Feng Yang's actions. The other party should be sighing in disappointment, but why did it have a hint of relief? "Since that's the case, I'll immediately return to report." Feng Yang stood up and put on his bamboo hat. "Since you're already here, you should at least let me do my part as a host." Mu Songlan was puzzled by Feng Yang's haste. "Even if you're in a hurry, don't tell me you don't even have time to have a meal and reminisce? I'll come again in a few days. I shouldn't delay now." I'll report back to the sage as soon as possible and make preparations. Wait until I've settled the matters at hand, then I'll naturally come again to drink with you. At that time, I'll stay in your house until you're annoyed and drive me out. Pa. Laughing loudly, Feng Yang waved his hand and left. A gust of wind blew and Feng Yang had already disappeared. How strange. Mu Songlan frowned as he looked at the empty doorway. How did this guy change his nature? But this guy's cultivation has improved too much. The last time I saw him, he was far inferior to me. But this time, the speed at which he left actually made me unable to detect him. How sharp. GMO walked over leisurely. Young Miss Huyen Alboa suddenly wanted to eat fresh fruits. Moreover, she wanted GMO to personally go out and buy them. Although GMO was unwilling, he still had no resistance towards young Miss Huyen's orders. He had no choice but to go out and buy some fruits. While he was at it, he also wanted to take a breath of fresh air. These few days, he had been ravaged by that woman. Just as he was about to reach Mu Songlan's door, GMO suddenly remembered that this old man had taken a heavy pill from him when Chu Yang and the others were not around to save his subordinates. That time, GMO's heart ached for a long time. Moreover, he had been scolded by Mo Tianji. A heavy pill is such an important thing. How could you give it away so casually? Why don't you give it away with your own life? You're a prodigal bastard. If it was used by someone to study the formula, can you bear the responsibility? Although it was proven that Mu Songlan had used it immediately to save someone, it didn't prevent GMO from being scolded by Mo Tianji for 2 hours. Mo Tianji's scolding was both sinister and sarcastic. GMO almost wanted to commit suicide on the spot. At this time, he had coincidentally passed by Mu Songlan's door. If he didn't go in and drink some wine to vent his anger, he would be letting himself down. Even if he didn't drink, he had to let this old man know that he had suffered a great grievance because of him that day. Second Master Ji wasn't the kind of person who would silently do good deeds without asking for anything in return. He was the kind of person who would ask for something in return. No matter what, you should at least sincerely say thank you to me, right? Now that he thought about it, Mu Songlan had taken it and left without saying anything. GMO felt even more wronged. Thinking about it, he immediately took a step forward. However, just as he turned the corner and saw Mu Songlan's door, he saw a person coming out of Mu Songlan's door. With a schwa sound, he flashed around the corner and almost collided with GMO. Almost at the same time, the two men dodged each other's attacks at a speed that was only a hair's breadth away. Then, the man on the other side stared at GMO with an extremely fierce look in his eyes. Then, his body flashed, and he disappeared without a trace. Although it was just a flash of 2 eyes, GMO only felt that those 2 eyes were like 2 sharp swords suddenly stabbing into his heart. His heart couldn't help but beat wildly a few times. A kind of bone-chilling fear arose spontaneously. All the hair on his body stood on end. This was an extreme fear. It was as if the god of death was standing in front of him just a moment ago. He actually didn't have the ability to resist. After a long time, GMO regained his senses. He realized that his clothes were already drenched in cold sweat. His entire body was weak and his 2 legs had almost turned into noodles. This was an extreme fear that came from the depths of his soul. Chapter 2348. GMO looked back with lingering fear and muttered, "How is this possible? I wasn't even this scared that day when I faced the heavenly demon overlord. Could it be that this person's strength is even more terrifying than Yuan Tianji's, or even much more terrifying?" GMO muttered to himself unintentionally. However, the moment he said these words, he was immediately shocked by his own words. In an instant, he was almost dumbfounded. Someone even more terrifying than Yuan Tianji, or even much more terrifying. What kind of person could it be? What level of existence was it? He tried hard to recall the appearance of the person who brushed past him, but to his surprise, he couldn't remember it at all. He only remembered a square and dignified face, an awe-inspiring aura, and a kind of peerless aura of a ruler descending upon the world. GMO shook his head and turned to walk towards Mu Tsong Lan's residence. At this moment, Mu Tsong Lan hadn't gone back to rest yet. When he unexpectedly saw GMO, he couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. "Seventh Master G? Why are you here?" Hearing this, GMO blurted out a curse. In the latest ranking of brothers, GMO had plummeted from the original 3rd to the 7th position. What he hated the most right now was other people calling him Old 7th, 7th Master, 7th Hero, 7th Young Master, and so on. Anyway, as long as he heard the number 7, he would be furious and have a headache. "What's wrong with you?" Mu Tsonglan frowned, confused. "Calling me GMO, little G, little MO, or even little dog or little cat sounds better than 7th Master G. Are you calling me that or insulting me?" GMO sighed with a melancholy expression. "7th Master G? Machine 2? Machine Master? What kind of nonsense is this?" GMO cursed in his heart. "Then, this old man will go easy on you and call you little G." Mu Tsonglan laughed. "Little G, little chick, and little chick. Shit. You won't be happy if you don't insult me, right? No matter what I say, I can't." GMO's head was full of black lines. "Just call me by my name. My fucking surname is really not good." Mu Tsonglan was stunned. The opening exchange between the two of them was just a simple way of addressing each other, but GMO had completely confused Commander Mu Tsonglan, leaving him completely at a loss. He almost collapsed. Mu Tsonglan really didn't know what to say. The person in front of him was an expert, a genuine expert. He was only in his 20s, yet he was already a sage-level expert. He was undoubtedly a genius, a peerless genius that was hard to come by even in hundreds of thousands of years. But why didn't he have the bearing of a saint? Wasn't this too much? Was the heavens blind? How could such amazing talent, opportunity, and luck fall into the hands of such trash? Forget it, there are at least 3 or 4 people like this. I really can't afford to get angry. There are even more monstrous freaks above them. I really don't know if I should continue thinking about them. Marshal Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he welcomed this young master, who he didn't even know how to address when he arrived, into the door. That's right, I still don't know why this guy has the time to visit me. Especially with a bag of fruits in his hand. Could it be a gift? This made Great General Mu even more confused. He was simply overwhelmed by the favor. He was truly overwhelmed by the favor. Of course, the main reason was because he was shocked. It wasn't the shock of surprise, but the shock of embarrassment. If you were a commoner, it would be fine if you came to visit with fruits, but this was the marshal's residence, the home of the most powerful person in the military. How could you come here with such a bag of fresh fruits? Even if you were carrying a head on your shoulders and nothing else, it would still be better than this, right? Looking at these ordinary fruits that could be bought with 1 purple cloud coin, Mu Tsonglan's forehead was filled with black lines. If others saw this, they would think that I, Mu Tsonglan, was so poor that I couldn't even afford fruits. Although old Mu had been criticized by everyone before, he had already been rehabilitated. What the hell was this? However, GMO obviously didn't think of this because in his heart, these fruits were originally his, and he would take them away in a while. These were all things that his wife wanted to eat. Even if he left his sword here, he absolutely couldn't lose the fruits that his wife wanted to eat. If he really lost them, it could easily lead to death. Cough cough. You say you? Just come. Why did you bring these things? You are treating me like an outsider. Mu Tsonglan didn't know the purpose of this young master's visit. He seemed to be very uncomfortable as he laughed dryly and barely managed to say a few words. Then he waved his hand and said, "Come, bring the fruits that Brother G bought for Madam into the inner hall." He really didn't know what to call him. 7th Master G couldn't do it, little G couldn't do it. This guy didn't have an official position, but his status was quite high. He was a genuine expert. After thinking for a while, Mu Tsonglan could only pinch his nose and adopt the pugilistic way of addressing people, brother. Wait. GMO was stunned when he heard this. He pushed away the servant who was about to take the fruits, and hit the fruits behind his buttocks with his other hand. He said in surprise, "Elder Mu, I bought these for my wife. How did it become that I bought them for your wife? I was going to take these fruits back. I was just passing by your place to pay you a visit. Why do you want to leave them behind? You take advantage of me?" The servant was dumbfounded and tongue-tied on the spot. He was completely stupefied. Mu Songlan was also instantly petrified on the spot. His old face alternated between red and white. What? After all this fuss, this bag of broken fruits is actually not for me. Yeah, your sister, you fucking brought a bag of fruits over to visit me and now you want to take it away? You actually said this in front of my servants? I actually became taking advantage of this opportunity? What the fuck is this? If today's matter were to spread out, Mu Songlan, a dignified marshal, would actually fall to the point where I have to extort a bag of fruits from you? Then this old man might as well kill himself. Too embarrassing. A certain marshal waved his hand and the servant left the hall with an extremely strange expression. His shoulders trembled and his footsteps staggered. Mu Songlan's face was as red as a date. He stared at GMO and did not want to speak for a moment. Or perhaps he really did not know what to say. GMO did not have the slightest intention of treating himself as an outsider. He sat down on the armchair at the head of the table and placed the fruits on the table beside him. He crossed his legs and said, "I say, old Mu, who was that fellow who just left? What a powerful aura. He must be an extraordinary person, right?" GMO had seen that person walk out of Mu Songlan's residence. Such a powerful expert, how could he not be curious and ask? Mu Songlan's eyebrows jumped twice. "It's an old friend of mine." "This old friend of yours? Where did he come from? He's really extraordinary." GMO sucked in a breath of cold air and said, "In the entire Heaven Imperial Court, I'm afraid his cultivation is at least in the top 3. At least in the top 3. This was GMO's evaluation that came from the deepest part of his heart. He even wanted to say number 1, but considering the existence of the Saint Monarch, he did not dare to say it. However, Mu Songlan, who heard this, was completely dumbfounded. Initially, when GMO said that the person was definitely an extraordinary person, Mu Songlan did not feel too surprised. After all, Feng Yang was close to the Saint Monarch and had the bearing of a superior. Although it was a bit of an overstatement to say that he was an extraordinary person, it was still acceptable. However, GMO's evaluation at the end was 2 what? In the entire Heaven Imperial Court, his cultivation was at least in the top 3. Feng Yang's cultivation was not bad, but it could not withstand GMO's praise. The last time Feng Yang met him, he was only a primary level saint. According to his deduction, he should be at this level in this lifetime. It would be difficult for him to progress any further. Now, even if he had some great fortuitous encounter and improved again, he would at most be a level saint. At most, he would be at the same level as GMO in front of him. With such a cultivation base, even among his subordinates, it was absolutely impossible for him to be ranked in the top 3. But now, GMO actually gave him the evaluation of top 3 in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Wasn't this too much? The weight of this evaluation was not just a little bit. Not to mention Mu Songlan, even if Yuan Tianji came back to life, he would not be able to reach the level of top 3 in the Heaven Imperial Court. I'm afraid, he still can't reach that level. You're overpraising him. Mu Songlan's eyes were dull and his words were incoherent. He did not know what he was talking about. Obviously, he was shocked by GMO's evaluation. Overpraising? Not overpraising, definitely not overpraising. GMO said with a rare serious tone and expression. My intuition is definitely not wrong. This guy, with just one look, he gave me a terrifying pressure. Not to mention anything else, he has at least surpassed Yuan Tianji. Mu Songlan was petrified again. Originally, Mu Songlan was still holding on to the idea that GMO's words were not very accurate and could be nonsense. A person who could bring fruits to the Grand Marshal's residence and even take them away, what could he not say? But now, It seemed that the situation was not right. Jimo's attitude was too serious, too serious, too serious. No matter how stupid GMO was, he still had the strength of a peak-level saint. He was only one step away from becoming a high-level saint. The intuition of such a person would definitely not be wrong. If that was the case, could it be that he was wrong? Chapter 2349. It's just that he looks a bit ugly. His eyebrows are a bit too thick. GMO smacked his lips and tilted his head. Not as handsome as me. Looking at GMO's meaty face and thinking of his old friend Feng Yang's handsome appearance, Mu Songlan's mouth twitched. He said with difficulty, "He's still quite handsome." Suddenly he paused. What did GMO just say? His eyebrows are too thick? Feng Yang's eyebrows are too thick? Mu Songlan suddenly stood up. You said his eyebrows are too thick? He suddenly stood up and asked without any warning. GMO nearly jumped in fright when he heard this. He had just drunk a mouthful of tea and had almost choked it out. He tried very hard to swallow it down. Then he blinked his eyes in alarm. Yes, your two eyebrows are almost connected together. They are as black as a brush. Isn't that thick? Mu Songlan's eyes flashed inexplicably. There was a hint of confusion in his eyes. Feng Yang had a feminine appearance since he was young. He had willowy eyebrows, a white and tender face, double eyelids, and a dimple when he smiled. He was quite handsome and could even be said to be beautiful. But how could his eyebrows be too thick? Could it be that GMO saw wrongly? However, for an expert at GMO's level of cultivation, even if it was just a glimpse, how could he be mistaken? Come here. Mu Songlan flashed to the door and shouted at a servant girl. That voice was filled with killing intent. It was as if he was giving the order to kill on the battlefield. This delicate and charming maidservant's face turned deathly pale under the sudden thunderous roar and the soaring murderous aura. She sat down on the ground and trembled all over. She was so scared that she wet her skirt without any resistance. A puddle of water spread out from under this beauty's skirt. Mu Songlan didn't care about this now. He picked her up and put her down in front of GMO. He pointed at her and said, "The eyebrows and face of the person you saw, are they similar to hers? Let me take a good look first." Then he ordered the girl, "Smile." That servant girl subconsciously screamed and finally fainted from fright. Mu Songlan seemed to have realized something. At this moment, his emotions were like an erupting volcano, surging violently and filled with destruction. Even the look in his eyes was somewhat ferocious. GMO was startled when he saw this. He immediately jumped up from his chair. He angrily covered his nose with his hand and said, "I say, old Mu, what's wrong with you? You're a man with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a square face. You actually caught a beauty for me to identify? How can this be compared?" As he spoke, he retreated further away. "You're too much. Moreover, you scared him to the point of wetting his pants before bringing him to me." GMO was flustered and exasperated. "Moreover, you actually asked him to smile under such circumstances? Is it you or me who has gone crazy?" Damn it, can the fruits I bought for my wife still be eaten after being smelled like this? What do you mean? Are you taking revenge on me for not bringing fruits for your wife? You're really something. Is it worth it to buy tens of millions of caddies of fruit for such a small amount of purple cloud coins? At this time, this fellow actually still remembered the fruits he bought for his wife. He even remembered that Mu Songlan had mentioned his wife in a perfunctory manner. However, Mu Songlan did not laugh. He had been a general for over 1,000,000 years and his thoughts were extremely meticulous. With just one sentence from GMO, he already knew that there was a huge problem. Such a man with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a square face. None of these four adjectives could be used to describe Feng Yang. This Feng Yang was a fake. He was actually a fake? Mu Songlan immediately thought of this. However, how was this possible? His face was completely pale. Since Feng Yang was not real, then who was this person? How could he disguise himself as Feng Yang so perfectly? He could even act out Feng Yang's habits so vividly. Mu Songlan actually did not notice any flaws at all. When he thought of Ji Mo's words, Mu Songlan felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. His strength can definitely be ranked in the top 3 of all the experts in the Heaven Imperial Court. He only glared at me, and the pressure he gave me was extremely terrifying. Not to mention anything else, it was at least more than Yuan Tian's limit. Only his eyebrows were a little too thick. His 2 eyebrows were almost connected together. They were as black as a brush. Such a big man with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a square face. Mu Songlan was stunned. To be able to give GMO such a shock, such a pressure, and with such an appearance, as far as he knew, in the entire Heaven Imperial Court, there was at most only one person like this. Describe in detail what the person you met just now looked like? Mu Songlan only felt his heart beating wildly and his mouth going dry. However, he still did not give up and asked. If you didn't mention it, I would have almost forgotten. What the hell? My memory has always been photographic. Even if it's just a glimpse, it's enough to remember it completely. But this time, I clearly met that person face to face. Now that I think about it, I actually can't remember his specific appearance at all. I only have a little impression of him left. I really can't describe it in more detail. GMO was also very depressed. Since when did he forget the appearance of a person he had just met? This wasn't a blind date shyness. This was too fucking embarrassing. You're saying, that person gave you a very dignified feeling? Mu Songlan took a deep breath. His eyes were like a hawk's as he tried to get rid of that face in his heart. What kind of dignified feeling was it? It was a kind of... GMO frowned tightly and racked his brains to find an adjective. It was a kind of... That's right, it was very similar to the feeling I had when I looked at my sister-in-law. What? Very similar to the feeling you had when you looked at your sister-in-law? Mu Songlan almost exploded. What kind of person was this? They were talking about a man who gave people a dignified feeling. How could you drag your sister-in-law into this? What kind of situation was this? However, Mu Songlan's willpower had been tempered for 1,000,000 years after all. He forcefully suppressed his violent emotions. As his mind raced, he suddenly thought of who the sister-in-law GMO was talking about might be. As he thought of this, he blurted out, "You're saying that the feeling that person gives you is very similar to Chu Yang's wife, Tai Budian?" "Yes, my sister-in-law, Tai Budian. She has no regard for anything else and makes people want to bow down and submit to her the moment they see her. Also, she's like a sovereign overlooking the world." That's right. GMO finally remembered. When I first saw him, a feeling rose in my heart. There's definitely no other person like him in the Heaven Imperial Court. Only he himself is supreme in the world. There's definitely no other person in the Heaven Imperial Court. Only he himself, supreme in the world. Mu Songlan's eyes were a little unfocused as he muttered, "Overlooking the world." For a moment, Mu Songlan was a little dazed. In fact, Mu Songlan had never seen Tai Budian before. However, he knew from Meng Wuyan that this superwoman had the aura of a supreme ruler. Meng Wuya's evaluation of Tai Budian was too high. He said that Tai Butian's aura of a ruler was really incomparable and was probably even superior to Yuan Tianjia, the heavenly emperor of the Black Cloud Heaven. Previously, Mu Songlan was very doubtful of Meng Wuya's evaluation. He didn't even believe it. No matter how much a woman had the aura of a ruler, she couldn't possibly have the aura of a ruler, let alone one that was even superior to Yuan Tianjia's. However, at this moment, Mu Songlan believed it. There was only one reasonable explanation for everything in front of him. However, this explanation was too shocking. Then he suddenly jumped up. His eyes emitted a crazed radiance. He lowered his voice and said, "Where's Minister Chu? Where is Advisor Emma? Where is Her Majesty Jianghu? Where are they now?" His voice was cold and the muscles on his face were twitching. Even his pupils were strangely dilated. GMO was completely frightened by his expression. He stuttered, Don't be like this. That man, could he be your old lover?" GMO swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Even in his current state of mind, even if he knew how shocking this news was, even if Mu Songlan's heart was beating wildly, even if Mu Songlan's state of mind was stable for more than 1,000,000 years, when he heard Ji Mo's words, his vision turned black and he almost fainted. Gritting his teeth, Mu Songlan glared at Ji Mo, seeing Ji Mo's eyes filled with gossip and his ears twitching as if he wanted to dig up some gossip. Mu Songlan calmed himself down and forcefully suppressed the strong desire to beat him up. He let out a long sigh and suddenly roared like a thunderclap, "Fuck your grandpa. That's a man." Mu Songlan didn't know how he said this sentence. GMO picked his ears disapprovingly. Men and men can also have true love. I can understand, especially for those who haven't seen women for a long time. Mu Songlan groaned and instantly had the urge to faint. However, his loud roar unexpectedly woke up the maidservant who had fainted on the ground. Realizing her current situation, she ran out of the hall, crying loudly in shame and indignation. The servants and guards outside looked at this young girl whose dress was clearly wet with an ambiguous expression. Their eyes were full of gossip. What was going on? Could it be that this girl's confession was rejected? And Marshal Mu even roared, "Fuck your grandfather, that's a man." Yes, this girl's grandfather was of course a man. No wonder this little sister was so sad that she ran out crying, "Even my fucking dress is wet, and you actually like men. How could this be endured?" All the guards were still standing ramrod straight with a serious expression, but thousands of vulgar thoughts flashed through their minds at this moment. Then they saw Marshal Mu stride out with a man in his hand. Yes, 7th Master Ji. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.